Hachette Audio presents The Sixth Wedding, written by Elin Hilderbrand, read by Aaron Bennett. What are we talking about in 2023? Home robots, life on planet B20, the resurgence of appointment television, an NFL team in Paris, a phone battery that holds a charge for 1 year, the Hamptons submarine, Elon Musk's moon colony, an 8 billion sensor economy, and the end of the pandemic. Social distancing, quarantining, PCR and antigen tests, masks and PPE are in our collective rear-view mirror. We can gather once again. 20,000 people pack into Madison Square Garden to hear Billy Joel segue from My Life into a cover of 10th Avenue Freeze-Out. Super Bowl 57 is held in Glendale, Arizona. And those who don't have tickets crowd around the bar at Kimmy's on the Greenway. Movie theaters are packed, people do the electric slide at weddings, and Viking River Cruises has a 3-year wait list. Every treadmill at Orange Theory Fitness in Boca Raton is spoken for. All Peloton classes in both New York and LA are sold out. The late-night Jimmys perform their monologues in front of a live studio audience. The Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs is at 95% occupancy, and there's no hope for getting a ticket to a Boston Pops Christmas performance unless you want to pay $5,000 on StubHub. Bingo night at Chi Point Senior Living in Milwaukee is back on, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. We all go to have our teeth cleaned, our eyes checked. The theme of the Met Ball is Fashion Returns. People get dressed up, wear heels. The impossible-to-get item is no longer toilet paper. It's a seat on Alitalia's Friday night flight from JFK to Rome. The online dating scene rebounds with a fervor. People are meeting IRL, with newcomer Firepink leading the way for Gen X and Boomers. The Dow soars over 40,000. And we thought the 1920s were roaring. Although we are relieved that life is getting back to normal, we have returned to our offices and in-person meetings. We're throwing away our ring lights. If we never Zoom again, it will be too soon. We have all learned some valuable lessons, and not just how to make sourdough bread. We have learned to save and budget for the unexpected. We have learned to cherish all the things we temporarily lost. Baseball games, author tours, Disney World, family reunions, charity benefits, college visits, college period, our sense of taste and smell, acoustic night at Frayed Edge Coffee, sitting next to a stranger on a bus or at a bar, seeing one another smile, and most especially, the opportunity to hug our loved ones wherever we want, whenever we want. We honor the ones we have lost. What are we talking about in 2023? We are talking about our shared grief. We are talking about our collective gratitude. Cooper. In the summer of 2023, Cooper Blessing is 56 years old. And when he gets down on one knee on the sidewalk in front of the Red Star Bar and Grill in Fells Point, he's momentarily concerned that he'll need help getting back up. But he'll worry about that in a minute. "Stacy," he says, prying the ring box open. The ring is a 1.75 carat ruby flanked by 1 carat oval diamonds set in platinum. Cooper bought the ring at Market Street Diamonds, which was where he bought rings for wives number 1 and 4, but those had been diamonds only. The ruby is something new. It's Stacy's birthstone. "Will you marry me?" Stacy Patterson's eyes widen. The people who were gathered outside the Red Star, couples dining at the cafe tables, people in line for the bar, an older gentleman out walking his Pomeranian, turned to stare. Stacy takes the ring box and snaps it shut. "Let's go to the car," she says, and she offers Cooper a hand. They're parked in the lot across Wolf Street. The walk there is like an extended free fall. Cooper and Stacy have had a wonderful evening. The Red Star has been their place for the past 8 months. The hostesses, bartenders, and waitstaff know them by name. They had drinks and dinner, and they danced to the live band, Purple Porpoise, until they were sweaty and breathless, making Cooper feel like he was 22 again, a senior at Johns Hopkins out on a date with his goucher girlfriend. He's wise enough to keep his mouth shut until they reach Stacy's car, a sleek silver Audi A4. Stacy appreciates fine automobiles, one of the many things Cooper loves about her. When they climb in, Stacy cranks the air conditioning, which is a relief. The Baltimore night is hot, sticky, foul. "I'm not going to marry you, Cooper." "You're not?" he says. He closes his eyes and tries to let the cool air soothe him. How did he misread this? At the risk of sounding sappy, he thought this would be his storybook ending. Cooper first saw Stacy Patterson 37 years earlier at a party in the basement of the Phi Gamma Delta house. It was early September, the first week of school. Cooper had the robust confidence of a sophomore, and he was finally in a position to chat up the freshman women from Goucher. They had all ignored him the year before. He picked Stacy like he was cutting the prettiest bloom off a rosebush. Stacy had long, dark hair, and she was wearing a yellow sundress. The other women in her cluster were in jean shorts, one in short overalls, reminding Cooper of his younger sister Mallory, who intentionally dressed to distress. Cooper's parents, Senior and Kitty, were formal people who believed in good grooming and first impressions. As enthusiastically as Mallory rejected these values, Cooper embraced them. He admired not only Stacy's dress but her pearl earrings, her sandals, her French manicure. She was put together. Cooper walked right up to Stacy and offered his hand and a smile, thinking how delighted Kitty would be when Cooper brought this young woman home. Cooper and Stacy had dated for 3 years, until Cooper graduated from Hopkins, moved to Washington, where he'd scored a prestigious job with the Brookings Institution, and decided that he had outgrown his college girlfriend. Stacy wasn't quite as upset as Cooper thought she might be. Because she'd been dating Cooper since her freshman year, she hadn't had the full college experience, she told him. The breakup would be good for them both, she said. What she meant, it turned out, was that she wanted to date other people, starting with the captain of the Hopkins lacrosse team. Okay, fine, Cooper thought. Good for Stacy. He could meet women at any one of the trillion bars in Georgetown. The problem was that Cooper was back to being a freshman at adult life. And the women that Cooper met at Clyde's and the Tombs were clerking for this judge, interning for that senator, researching those initiatives at the NIH, and they intimidated him. More often than Cooper would have guessed, when he got home from the bars at night, he called Stacy. Sometimes she answered, sometimes she didn't. Cooper and Stacy got back together briefly 10 years later, when Cooper was home in Baltimore for Christmas, and Stacy, still single, was working as VP of Marketing at the Baltimore Aquarium. That interlude fell between Cooper's first and second marriages, and although Stacy had been eager to get more serious, Cooper was hesitant, though why he can't recall, and he'd stopped calling. Stacy, meanwhile, married one of the marine biologists at the aquarium and had 2 children, First a daughter, Amanda, and 5 years later a son, Alec. Stacy and her family lived in Ellicott City. The kids went to parochial school, and husband and wife presumably commuted to work together. Cooper received a Christmas card every year, the tasteful kind with carefully curated photos, skiing in the Poconos, on the beach in Rehoboth, and he thought, okay, fine. Good for Stacy. This past Christmas, however, the card included only pictures of Stacy and the kids. The husband, Lars, wasn't mentioned. A quick check of Facebook confirmed that Stacy was, once again, single. At that point, Cooper had been divorced from Amy for nearly 3 years. He couldn't call Stacy fast enough. And they had been together ever since, nearly 8 months. They were happy, he thought. They joked all the time about how their relationship was the best use of Facebook. No one would ever forget your birthday again, but that didn't hold a candle to reuniting with your old flame. You've been married 5 times, Stacy says now, and divorced 5 times. I love you, but you're a bad bet. And although I have some unflattering qualities, stupidity isn't one of them. The quickest way to put an end to this relationship is to get married. Coop opens the ring box. The ruby is the color of a bleeding heart. But I like being married, Coop says. You don't, though, Stacy says. You failed at it. 5 times, Coop. That isn't normal. Maybe the 6th time is the charm, Cooper says. He's trying for levity. Stacy has a great sense of humor. She's fun. She's smart and secure. She gets it. It being the world, life, in a way that none of his wives did, and Cooper wants to grow old with her. They can take Viking River cruises, drive an RV across America, watch Jeopardy, learn to play bridge. Stacy starts the car. There's something wrong with you, Coop. And I was mistaken before. The quickest way to put an end to this relationship is to propose on the sidewalk like that. That was impulsive. I'm sorry, Coop says. What if I start over privately, here and now? Please, Stacy, will you marry me? No, she says, as she feeds their parking stub into the greedy mouth of the machine at the exit. The barrier rises. I'm sorry, but no. There's something wrong with you, Coop. Stacy Patterson had the courage to state what no one else would. All his life, people have been telling Cooper he's an old soul. He's been here before. He was born with an ease, an understanding. Who was the first person to tell him this? His mother? A teacher? Jerry Gladstone from across the street? Well, whoever it was did Cooper a great disservice. He'd always trusted his instincts, even after they turned out to be wrong again and again and again, and again and again. Cooper's most recent ex-wife, Amy, is a psychologist in the district, and in order to find someone who isn't a close colleague of Amy's, Cooper has to look in Northern Virginia, Fairfax, as it turns out, where he makes an appointment with a woman named Dr. Theron Robb. Whereas Amy is known as a touchy-feely therapist, Dr. Robb is cool and reserved. Cooper appreciates this. He doesn't need someone to empathize with him. He needs someone to tell him what's broken and how to fix it. Dr. Robb is in her late 40s, Cooper would guess. She's tall, black, and as slender and graceful as a ballerina. But Cooper must think of his therapist as a person, not a woman. You lost your parents in a tragic car accident in 2013 and your sister to cancer in 2020. You've been divorced 5 times. Dr. Robb pauses. That's a lot of loss. Cooper nods. It's no wonder you proposed to Stacy, Dr. Robb says. I'm sure you were driven by a primal instinct for permanence. Someone who would stay. Maybe, Coop says. I'm not completely alone. My nephew Link is living with me this summer, doing an internship at Brookings. We're close. But he'll go on to have his own life, Dr. Rob says. He won't be with you forever. True. Cooper doesn't like to think about this. Link is the only family he has left, and Cooper loves the kid like a son, always has. Why did your marriages end? Dr. Rob asks. Various reasons, Coop says. Sometimes it was them, sometimes me. The most recent divorce was me. I wanted out. Dr. Rob studies Cooper frankly from behind her glasses. He would love to know what she's thinking. When was the last time you were happy? She asks. When was the last time things felt right? Can you take me back there? I'm not completely obtuse, Coop says. I've given this exact question a lot of thought. The mistake started on Nantucket Island in 1993. Dr. Rob laughs, startled. I hadn't anticipated that kind of archaeological dig, but I'm game. What happened on Nantucket in 1993? I left my own bachelor weekend, Coop says. My sister Mallory was cool enough to invite me and my two best friends to visit her over Labor Day. And then she had her best friend from growing up come as well, so there were 5 of us around the dinner table. I can remember when we all hoisted our glasses, thinking how lucky I was. That moment was golden. Coop sighs. Then later that night, my fiancée, Crystal, called to demand that I come home. She was jealous, she was threatened, controlling, Dr. Rob says. And I left, Cooper says. I abandoned my sister. I abandoned my friends. But most of all, I abandoned myself. Dr. Rob nods. So I guess if I could go back to any point, I would choose that night. I see. A bunch of things happened that weekend after I left, Cooper says. Crazy stuff. Like from a novel or a movie. And I set them all in motion by leaving. If I had stayed on Nantucket in 1993 instead of going home, my sister's life, my friend Jake's life, and my friend Frey's life all would have been different. That's a pretty big statement, Dr. Rob says. I know, Cooper says, but it's true. He drops his head into his hands. I can't tell you how many times I've wished I could go back and do it over. Ursula. On Sunday evenings, Ursula stops working long enough to make 2 phone calls, the first to her daughter Bess, and the second to her ex-husband, Jake McCloud. This is what passes for Ursula's family life these days. Bess lives in Washington, D.C., at the Sedgwick in DuPont Circle, just like Ursula herself did 30 years earlier. She works for the National Council of Nonprofits, an umbrella organization that consults with and advises nonprofits across the country, and it's her dream job. Bess has always wanted to save the world and empower the disenfranchised, and in this job, she doesn't have to choose between the homeless and hungry children. She helps everyone who's in need. Ursula sends Bess money for rent and living expenses, and if and when Bess decides she wants to go to law school, Ursula will pay for that as well. How was your week, sweetie? Ursula asks. Long, Bess says. I'm working with the Red Cross on their national campaign. That sounds exciting, Ursula says. The director basically offered me a job, Bess says. I'm not surprised, Ursula says. More likely than Bess going to law school will be one of the nonprofits she's working with snapping her up as executive director. She has always been more like Jake than Ursula. Did you do anything fun this weekend? I had a date Friday night with some guy who works for the Nature Conservancy, Bess says. I had to spend 2 hours pretending to be outdoorsy while he described climbing Denali. It was painful. DC is filled with men, sweetheart, Ursula says. Find yourself a hot young lobbyist. I am not dating a lobbyist, Bess says. But you're right, those guys are the hottest. Honestly, it's like hotness and social conscience are inversely proportionate. Except for your father, Ursula says, a do-gooder and hot. Ew, Mom, please. You're still so young, Ursula says. You should wait at least another 5 years before... I know, Bess says. How was your weekend, Mama? Did the great UDG do anything fun? Depose the bagel guy, maybe? Ursula smiles. She's standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows in her living room that overlook Central Park. She feels like she could dip her toe in the Bethesda fountain. She's still in her running shorts and Lululemon tank, both damp with sweat. She did 4 laps around the reservoir as soon as the beastly heat of the day eased a bit. I went for a run in the park, Ursula says, so I'm feeling very outdoorsy. And I'm going to order up from Maria after I talk to Dad. The lobster and burrata salad. I've been thinking about it all day. You should start dating too, Mama, Bess says. I can make you a profile on Firepink? That's the new one for olders. Ha, Ursula says. Every man in this country already knows my profile. That's what happens when you run for president. You lose your mystique on the dating apps. Bess laughs. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby, Ursula says. Talk next week. They hang up, and Ursula stays at the window, watching the sky turn purple, and tries to judge how Bess sounds. A bit too much like Ursula herself, lonely and working too hard. Ursula and Bess hadn't always been this close. Bess's adolescence had been a battlefield. Bess challenged Ursula's political views and called her out on her relentless ambition. Achieving is the most important thing to you. It's more important than love, Bess said when she was 15 years old. And wow, Ursula had felt that comment like a slap to the face. Bess has mellowed as she's gotten older. She approved of Ursula's vote against confirming Stone Cavendish as a Supreme Court justice, and when Ursula announced her bid for the presidency a short while later, Bess joined the campaign, courting Gen Z voters. But the development that brought mother and daughter closer, the event that finally made them friends, was Ursula's defeat on Election Day. Ursula had been stunned when first Florida and then Ohio swung for her opponent, Fred Page. Ursula de Gournsey and Fred Page weren't that dissimilar. Fred was a centrist who leaned a little left, and Ursula a centrist who gravitated a bit right. But they agreed on more than they disagreed on, and their debates had been civil, even collegial. Ursula felt she could afford to be nice to Fred. She hadn't run a single attack ad, because she was dead certain that she was going to win. All of the polls had her ahead by 3 to 5 points. Her campaign had outspent Fred's campaign by 20%. Bayer Burkhart, who served as Ursula's shadow campaign manager, assured her daily that a de Gournsey presidency was a lock. So what had happened? All Ursula can come up with is that when people were alone in the voting booth, they couldn't bring themselves to vote for a woman. The problem wasn't Ursula. It was American society. Of course, Ursula harbored plenty of private fears, that ultimately she wasn't likable, that the country saw her naked ambition, her quest for power, that somehow she hadn't projected her desire to serve as effectively as Fred had. Ursula had focused too much on foreign policy and not enough on controlling the pandemic. She had mentioned Notre Dame too many times or Georgetown Law. She had seemed like a braggart when she told Anderson Cooper that she was fluent in French, Spanish, Italian. She rarely attended church, despite her Catholic background. She hadn't seemed maternal enough, or like a devoted enough wife. So much more was expected of a female candidate. It didn't matter. Fred Page had won fair and square. Ursula gave a beautiful concession speech wishing Fred the very best and encouraging her supporters to celebrate his victory. She spent the next 2 days in their house in South Bend in a numb fog, while Jake and Bess dealt with the news vans lined up on LaSalle Street. At night, Ursula would lie on the couch, clicking among the news outlets, listening to everyone's surprised reactions about the outcome. Bess brought Ursula mugs of tea that she didn't drink and made her sandwiches she didn't eat. Bess covered Ursula with a blanket at night and kissed her mother's temple. "I'm proud of you," Bess said. "You're taking time to process. You aren't making excuses. You aren't blaming anyone. It takes an extraordinary person to handle this kind of loss as graciously as you are." At these words, Ursula sat up and stretched out her arms. Bess came to her and finally, Ursula cried. She cried for her broken dreams, dreams she'd nurtured since she was a child. She cried out of embarrassment. She cried for her dead father. She had wanted to make him proud. She cried from exhaustion and bone-deep weariness. She had given the campaign everything she had, nearly 2 full years of her life, trips to 43 states, bus rides, flights, hotel conference rooms. How many women, not to mention girls, had told her she was inspiring? How many virtual fundraisers had she attended where she had given some variation of her platform speech straight up the fairway? She spoke out for common-sense politics, against extremist agendas. Ursula would be a moderate, clear-eyed president who would use her intellect and her excellent judgment to govern. She cried because she had been rejected, plain and simple. "It hurts," she told Bess. "It really hurts." "I know, Mama, but that's okay," Bess said. "Pain means you're growing." The call came 3 weeks later, while Ursula was still convalescing, still dismantling her campaign, and still working as a United States Senator from Indiana. It was Fred Page. He asked Ursula to serve in his cabinet, Attorney General. This was, needless to say, unexpected. Indeed, unprecedented. And it wasn't just a good guy Fred Page promotional stunt. It wasn't a nod to unity. Fred said, "You're the most accomplished lawyer I know. I would trust you with a job above and beyond any other candidate on my list." Yes, Ursula thought. He's right. I would be the best at this job. Ursula told Fred she'd consider it, and she called her executive coach, Jeannie. After an hours-long conversation, Ursula and Jeannie reached some conclusions. Ursula didn't want to be Attorney General. She didn't want to stay in politics at all. When her senatorial term was up, she would return to private life. She wanted to go back into mergers and acquisitions. She wanted to live in New York City. She would do both, she decided. After she hung up with Jeannie, she went to the kitchen where she found Jake walking in with the pizza from Barnaby's. "We have to talk," she said. Jeannie and I decided. You and Jeannie decided? You didn't bother to ask me what I thought? Because I don't matter. Because you have no consideration for me or for this so-called family. Bess and I have always bent to your will, and now your will is to be an attorney in New York, and you think I'm just going to, what, pick up and move my life there? I'm not, Ursula. I'm staying here. Ursula had laughed. I'm not staying here one day longer than I have to. South Bend is the last place I want to end up." Jake stared at her. "I should have stood up to you long ago. Do you know why I didn't? Because I have always believed that you were special. But I'm not giving in on this. If you go to New York, Ursula, you go alone." It was an ultimatum. But was he serious? Was Ursula serious? They let the topic drop. Ursula still had a year of her term left, so going anywhere was a moot point. Maybe Ursula was suffering from PTSD. Maybe she would change her mind and decide that it would be nice to stay in the Bend with her mother and Jake's parents nearby. Or maybe Ursula and Jake would finally get divorced. While they were dating, they had broken up a handful of times and seen other people, but they had always gravitated back to each other. In the late 90s, Ursula had had an affair with her associate, Anders Jorgensen. Jake had conducted a one-weekend-a-year affair with a woman named Mallory Blessing for the entirety of their marriage. They had survived all that. Surely they would survive Ursula's presidential loss. Now, it's 4 years later. Fred Page will sail easily into a second term, and Ursula is the managing partner at Hamilton, Laverty & Smythe, the biggest M&A firm in the country. She bought a 2-bedroom apartment on the 78th floor of 436 Park, which is the premier address in Midtown, maybe in all of New York. Ursula lost the presidency and lost her husband, but she's gained a city. She loves the noise, the taxis, the subway, the sushi restaurants that deliver 24 hours, the elegant hotel bars, the doormen, the bodegas with their rainbow of floral bouquets out front. She loves the Cuban coffee place and the Vietnamese food truck. She loves racing down to Soho when she needs something new to wear. She loves the FDNY. She loves the guys who drive the horse carriages in Central Park. She loves the Upper East Side mommies and nannies. She loves the 10-story screens in Times Square and the tugboats on the East River. She loves that while everyone knows who she is, nobody cares, because this city is also home to Alicia Keys, Yoko Ono, Sarah Jessica Parker, people far more exciting than Ursula. Does she wish she had someone to share it with? Yes, she does. Maybe a dating app then, after all? Ursula laughs at herself and calls Jake. She's fully prepared to hear about his fun-filled weekend, sailing on Lake Michigan, meeting his parents for dinner at the South Haven Yacht Club, picking cherries, brunching in Saugatuck. At some point, she's sure Jake will start dating. Ursula will pretend to be supportive, and he'll know she's pretending. When he answers, he says, "You're never going to believe who just called me." "Who?" "Cooper Blessing," Jake says. "He has the craziest idea." Cooper Blessing is hosting a bachelor weekend on Nantucket over Labor Day. "Please tell me he's not getting married again," Ursula says. "What will that make it? 7? 8? 6, Jake says, and no, he's not getting married. It's the opposite. He proposed to this girl named Stacy who was at Goucher when we were at Hopkins. She said no, and now, as part of the work he's doing with his new therapist, he wants to recreate the bachelor weekend, only make it all about the guys. Coop is single, Fraser Dooley is single." Yes, Ursula read about Fraser and Anna Dooley's divorce in People. Anna walked with $280 million, and Ursula had thought fleetingly, the way one does, about dating Fraser Dooley. "And you're single," Ursula says. "I shouldn't say it's all about the guys, because Leland Gladstone is coming too," Jake says. "She was with us the first year." "Wow," Ursula says. "That's going to be a veritable who's who." Leland Gladstone is the founder of the huge women's lifestyle blog Leland's Letter, and she was recently chosen as one of Time magazine's most influential people of the year. Leland had been plenty influential in Ursula's life. She wrote an article in Leland's Letter entitled, "Same Time Next Year. Can It Save Modern Marriage?" which had been Ursula's first hint about Jake and Mallory. "Won't it be difficult for you?" Ursula asks. "Going back to Mal's cottage," Jake says. He sighs. "I don't know, Ursula. Probably. I'd rather not get into a big fight about it. I just got off the phone with Coop, and I thought I'd let you know that I'll be on Nantucket next weekend." "You're letting me know now, but not the 28 years that you went to see Mallory." "Ursula, we aren't doing this." "Right," Ursula says. "Well, please give everyone my best." "Oh, I will." "And report back." "Of course, Sully." She smiles at the nickname. "Come see me sometime. I miss you." "That's sweet of you to say. Talk next week." They hang up, and Ursula presses her phone to her heart and stares out at the city beneath her. It's dark enough now that lights are starting to come on. Back to Nantucket for Labor Day. It sounds like fun, actually, and Ursula half wishes she'd been invited. She pours herself a glass of wine, orders up her lobster and burrata from Maria, and downloads the Fire Pink app on her phone. She will create an online dating profile. Ursula de Gournsey. Age, 56. This is going to hurt, Ursula thinks. But that's okay. Pain means she's growing. Link. "So it's okay with you if we invade the cottage?" Uncle Cooper asks. "Yeah, of course," Link says. When Uncle Coop said he was planning to head up to Nantucket for the weekend, Link was afraid he'd be expected to go along, and that was the last thing he wanted to do. He'd flown back to the island over the week of the 4th of July, when he'd hung out with his friends from high school and even hooked up with his ex-girlfriend, Nicole, the one who ditched him on day 6 of her Italian semester abroad. While it had been fun, it also made Link unbearably sad. Link missed his mother every second of every day. But when he was on Nantucket, the memories were everywhere, especially in the cottage where Mallory had raised him for 18 years. Mallory was present everywhere he looked. Her books were on the shelves. Her favorite green pans were in the kitchen cabinets. The quilt she made out of Link's old t-shirts was smoothed across his bed. Link could see the spot on the front deck where Mallory used to sit when she watched Link and his friends swimming, or when she drank her wine as the sun went down. Mallory and Link had their usual seats at the narrow harvest table, Link at the head, Mallory next to him in the seat closest to the kitchen, because she was often up to get extra napkins or more ice or second helpings for Link. They had their designated spots on the sofa. Link would do his homework, Mallory would grade papers. On Sunday, they watched football. His mother was a Baltimore Ravens fan, which he teased her about relentlessly. "Swim in a little, please. Link! Lincoln Dooley, swim in! Did you brush your teeth? Where are you with your history project? Want a kayak? We'll be back in an hour, then I'll drive you to Dylan's. Did you put on sunscreen? Why the long face, handsome? Talk to Mama. Call your father, please. He's been texting me, and I'm afraid he's going to send drones next. There's a card from your grandparents on the counter. I bet it has money in it. You know what makes everything better? Guacamole. I will never be disappointed if you strike out swinging. That means you tried. My 8th period class was a bitch today. Come give your mom a hug. You will never, ever understand how much I love you. Until you have children of your own, and then every word I've ever said will make perfect sense. Link is relieved that the weekend Uncle Coop is planning is just for old people. Link's father is flying in from Seattle. Leland is coming from New York, and Jake McCloud is traveling to the island from South Bend, Indiana. It's supposed to be a reunion of some weekend that happened before Link was born. Link doesn't ask too many questions lest he get roped in. Jake McCloud, though, has always intrigued him. When Mallory was dying, she asked Link to call Jake, and Jake and his daughter Bess had left the Ursula de Gournsey campaign so that Jake could come say goodbye to Mallory. He brought a guitar and sang to her. Link and Bess McCloud had taken a walk on the beach, and Link said, "I feel like something's going on that I don't understand." Bess said, "My dad told me Mallory is an old friend of his." "Oh," Link said. Bess had laughed. "Do they think we're naive? They're more than friends." "Are they?" Link said. "I've never heard my mom mention his name before, and I would have remembered that. Your family is a very big deal." "My mother is a very big deal," Bess said. "My dad and I are just infantry soldiers." She picked up a coag shell. "Look," Link smiled. "You don't get to the beach much?" Bess examined the inside of the shell, the swirls of blue and purple. Wampum, what used to be traded like money. "I'm taking this home." They kept walking. "I like thinking that my dad had something of his own, a secret friendship or whatever. Or maybe they're in love. Maybe they've been in love all these years." "Maybe?" Link said. The thought was, frankly, absurd. Link won't lie. He's psyched to have his uncle's place in Georgetown to himself for the weekend. It's a bachelor's paradise. The townhouse on Q Street is 3 stories tall with a finished media room in the basement, and it's decorated like something out of a design magazine. The whole house is done in black and white with pops of color. In the living room, there's a curvy flame orange sofa and 2 electric lime green cup chairs. There's a sweeping staircase with a curved black banister. Coop has huge abstract paintings and modern sculpture on pedestals. It's real art. He goes to the galleries and gets into complicated negotiations with the owners. And then there are antiques scattered throughout. Some of the pieces are from Link's grandparents' house in Baltimore, and some are from the far-flung countries Coop has visited. There's a chess set from India that resides permanently in the sunny breakfast nook with windows that overlook the back courtyard. And every morning when there's time, Coop and Link play. Link has gotten pretty good. Link is thinking about having a party. Just some of the other interns from Brookings and his fraternity brother, Woj, from USC, who's working on Capitol Hill this summer and who knows a crazy amount of smart and beautiful women. It won't be a full-blown banger. The last thing he wants is to trash Coop's place. But he's thinking about some good people and good whiskey. Coop has a wine and whiskey cellar tucked behind the home gym in the basement, out back in the courtyard. He'll pick up some tacos and banh mi, and play some music and generally flex like the place is his own. Before Coop leaves on Friday morning, he hands Link $300, because that's the kind of awesome uncle he is. Link spends his entire walk to work reminding himself that he has to be a responsible adult and not act like a kid in a movie whose parents are away for the weekend. He'll cut the party off at 50 people, 60 max. But when Link gets to the office and starts firing off texts, Party at my house tonight, 8 p.m. He gets a rude awakening. It's a holiday weekend, the last before people go back to college, graduate school, etc., and everyone is leaving town. Woj is going to Fenwick Island. The other interns are heading to Dewey, Ocean City, Cape May. His buddy Oliver is going home to his parents' house on the eastern shore of Maryland and asks if Link wants to go with him. My dad has a sailboat, Oliver says, and my parents are having a cocktail party on Sunday with a tent and a Dixieland band. It'll be fun. Sailing, cocktails, a Dixieland band? It does sound kind of fun, but it's not what Link had in mind. If he wanted to be on the water, at the beach, he would have gone with his uncle. He wants city life. I think I'll stay put. Thanks, man, Link says. His idea for the weekend instantly changes. He'll just hang out at the house, playing loud music on Coop's state-of-the-art sound system. He'll watch movies in the home theater. He'll sip the whiskey and cognac alone. He was raised an only child. He can entertain himself. But once Link gets home from work and takes a shower, the city is a smoking griddle. Why did he not go to the beach? He can't settle down. He feels like a friendless loser, sitting home alone. He should go out. He will go out. He remembers his mother's story about going to Nantucket when she was his age without knowing a soul. Honestly, she said, it was liberating. I was in control of my future. He heads to a place he and Woj sometimes went called Roofers Union in Adams Morgan, and he finds it pumping. There are people his age drinking and laughing at the tables on the street, and there's a line of young, beautiful people snaking out the door. He waits his turn, presents his ID to the bouncer, and heads inside. He goes to the upstairs bar. It's normally a little less crazy than the one downstairs. There are 3 free seats at the far end, and beyond those sits a girl with dark hair and glasses, absorbed in her phone. She has a glass of wine in front of her. Is she alone? Link gives her a couple seats as a buffer, orders a Stoli tonic with a twist of lemon, and after his drink arrives and he's had a sip, he glances over. At the same time, she looks up at him. He knows her. It's... Oh my God, she says. You're... Yeah, he says. Wait, this is weird. I was just thinking about you. It's Bess McCloud. This is surreal. Although Link has just learned that this phenomenon has a name, where you think about someone and then, out of the blue, they appear. My dad went to Nantucket with your uncle and your dad, Bess said. He just texted to say he landed. That's crazy, Link says. He drinks in the sight of Bess McCloud. She's just as pretty as he remembers. Nerdy pretty, with glasses and hair that hangs in her face a little. Are you waiting for someone? Link asks. Bess rolls her eyes. I'm supposed to be on a Bumble date, but the guy is stuck on the metro. She holds up her phone. It says he's 16 minutes away. Link slides down the bar next to her. I can hang with you for 16 minutes, he says. Then when your boyfriend gets here, I'll leave quietly. Bess laughs. He's not my boyfriend, she says. I don't even know him. He's a lobbyist for the alcohol industry. A lobbyist? Link says. Legal bribery. Exactly. Bess sighs. I normally stay away, but the dude is probably good-looking and rolling in cash, Link thinks. Looks like I have 16 minutes to try and lure you away from the dark side, he says. I'm working for Brookings, domestic policy. I analyze the impact of policy decisions on the least served among us and suggest ways to make them more effective. I work in nonprofits, Bess says. Sexy, Link says. Yeah, as sexy as being a producer for public television, Bess says. Hey, "Do you still have that shell?" Link asks. "That quahog shell that you found on the beach in Nantucket?" Bess sips her wine and nods. "It's on my dresser, actually." "No. Seriously?" "Swear to God." "And did I what?" The thing that Link wants to ask might take another drink, but the clock is ticking. The lobbyist will probably show up with his American Express Obsidian card in 11 minutes. "Did you ever ask your dad what was going on between him and my mom?" Bess's green eyes find Link's from behind her glasses. Her eyebrows raise. "I did." She swivels her head to take in the raucous bar scene beyond them. "Do you maybe want to go someplace quieter and I can tell you about it?" Link laughs. "What about your date?" Bess checks her phone. "The pin hasn't moved. He's stuck on the metro. I'll cancel him and we can go over to Lapis for Afghan food. Does that sound okay?" Link doesn't care if they go to McDonald's. There's no way he's going to miss a chance to sit across the table from this beautiful, nerdy girl and learn something new about his mother. "Sounds great," he says. Leland. When Leland's JetBlue flight from JFK touches down on Nantucket, she looks out the window and takes note of the rows and rows of private planes, including an impressive jet with the frayed edge coffee logo on the side. She experiences a childish burst of excitement. Frey is here. She pulls down the front of her denim cloche hat and puts on oversized sunglasses. There are some young women farther back on the plane who recognized Leland at the gate in New York. They asked for a selfie with her, which she indulged even though she's more than over it. But Leland's brand and Leland's letter are all about women lifting up other women, so she can hardly refuse anyone. She hurries down the plane's stairway and practically runs across the tarmac. Nantucket Island. The name speaks of wealth and entitlement, though to Leland the idea of Nantucket is inextricably tied to memories of the best friend she has ever had in her life, Mallory Blessing. The first time Leland set foot on this island was Labor Day weekend, 1993. She had been so young, only 24 years old. In those days, she lived on the Upper East Side and worked as an editorial assistant at Bard and Scribe. Leland had thought she was special. She emulated the lockjaw of the Vassar girls she worked with. She dyed her hair pink. She bought all her clothes from thrift shops in the village, except for a stiff leather jacket from Trash and Vaudeville that she spent a whopping $900 on because Ray Goodman himself said that Leland reminded him of a young Patti Smith. When Leland came to Nantucket on that first trip, she had behaved atrociously. She kissed Frey, Fraser Dooley, her first love, in the back seat of Mallory's car. But then, once they got to the bar, she bumped into an acquaintance from New York, Kip Sudbury, whose father was in commercial real estate and who had a yacht at his disposal, and Leland left Mallory and Frey and Cooper without a word of explanation. She ditched them. It made her cringe to remember it now. The only excuse she had was youth. She returned to Nantucket a few years later with her girlfriend, the novelist Fiella Roget, Fifi, but things hadn't gone much better. That was early on in Leland and Fifi's relationship, back when Leland was still threatened by Fifi's fame and was alternately possessive and bitter. It didn't help that Fifi shamelessly flirted with Mallory, maybe as a way of reminding her who in the couple had the allure, the power. Leland should have laughed off Fifi's behavior. Mallory was so hopelessly straight that she would only have seen the sexual overtures as Fifi being friendly, but instead, Leland had lashed out by tearing Mallory down. Mallory had overheard Leland insulting her, and the weekend had been ruined. Leland had once read an interview with Toni Morrison where the author said she regretted a third of her life. Leland's percentage was running a bit higher than that. The last time Leland had been on Nantucket was 4 years earlier, when Mallory was dying. She had skin cancer that she thought she'd successfully treated, but it metastasized to her brain. It wasn't fair. Mallory was a good person, a mom and a teacher, a reader and a thinker, the most generous friend in what she was willing to accept and forgive. It should have been Leland in the bed. Leland deserved little in the way of mercy from the universe. Her life had been a cakewalk by comparison. She had always been free to be self-absorbed. She gets a text. It's Coop. I'm out front in Mal's Jeep. Leland's fellow New Yorkers are all looking very self-consciously Nantucket-y in their faded red pants and straw hats. Leland has made a concession to the season by wearing Eileen Fisher, the queen of black linen. Unlike these weekend warriors, Leland feels she belongs here because while they all check their Ubers, she has someone waiting for her out front in a seen better days Jeep. The girls who approach Leland at the gate in JFK are right behind her. She can hear them checking the address of their Airbnb, and then one of them says, "Oh my God, look! I think that's Fraser Dooley." Leland raises her eyes. Sure enough, Frey is walking out of the private jet terminal wearing his usual uniform of white t-shirt, jeans, Ray-Ban Wayfarers, and a messenger bag strapped across his chest. His blondish gray hair is long and unkempt. The hair is his signature. It's what makes him the most recognizable CEO in the country. When he raises his arm and calls out, "Lee!" it's all she can do to stop herself from running into his arms. "I'm jealous AF right now," one of the girls stage whispers. "He knows Leland Gladstone." Leland is tempted to turn around and say, "He was my boyfriend in high school." That would have given them something to talk about. But Leland is well beyond defining herself by any relationship she's had with a man. "Hey, Frey," she says with a coy smile. They embrace and kiss, gestures of fondness that Leland missed during the pandemic years. Frey smells like some kind of heavenly, expensive aftershave. He's so delicious that Leland would like to take a bite of him, a reaction that thoroughly surprises her. Cooper honks the horn. "Let's go, kids," he says. Frey gallantly takes Leland's bag and tosses it into the back of the Jeep. Then he opens the passenger door so Leland can hitch her skirt and climb in. She sees her fans gawking from the sidewalk, and she can't help herself. She gives a 4-finger wave. "Woohoo!" Coop shouts. He turns up the radio, which is playing the top 500 rock songs of all time in honor of the holiday weekend, and number 426 is Van Halen's "I'll Wait." It has been a very long time since Leland has listened to Van Halen. She sticks with female artists, Alison Krauss, Norah Jones, Lizzo, and the song delivers her right back to Deepening Road in 1984. She and Mallory are freshmen in high school, and Cooper and Frey are juniors. Even though Leland has been around both boys all her life, they attain a new mystique that year because they get their driver's licenses. Cooper is the good boy, clean-cut, preppy, and Frey is the bad boy. Frey's hair is long. He wears red parachute pants and walks around with a permanent scowl, flipping his bangs out of his eyes. Leland finds him mesmerizing, but she doesn't tell Mallory because Frey is like a brother to her and, ew. Frey is the arbiter of everyone's musical tastes. He listens to Van Halen, Twisted Sister, Honeymoon Suite. Frey lives with his grandparents around the corner on Edgevale, but he's always at the Blessing house with Coop. And because of this, Leland and Mallory start spending all their time there as well. Leland and Mallory ask Coop and Frey for rides, even though there's nowhere to go. Downtown Inner Harbor is a destination, but the shopping is touristy and expensive, and Fells Point is one bar after another that they can't get into. Still, they beg to be allowed to ride around in the back seat, anything to get them out of the house. They're sick of watching movies in Leland's basement rec room and listening to records. They both know there's life out there somewhere, and they're ready for it. "Sorry," Coop says. "Riding around with my little sister and her best friend isn't my idea of a good time. It's babysitting." At the end of October, Coop starts dating a girl named Alana Bratton, who goes to Bryn Mawr. Alana is beautiful, she's a senior, and when she snaps her fingers, Coop does her bidding. The person who is left out is Frey. His buddy has ditched him for a girl. At the beginning of November, Mallory gets the flu. Leland is under strict orders from her parents, Jerry and Steve, as well as from the Blessings, to stay away from the Blessing house until the contagious period is over. Leland's parents are leaving for the weekend on a leaf-peeping trip through the horse country of Virginia, and Leland thinks how unfair it is that she will now have the house to herself, but nobody to enjoy the freedom with. It's as she's watching Coop pull out of the driveway from her bedroom window, he's probably off to pick up Alana, that Leland gets the idea to call Frey. "Mal is sick and my parents are away," Leland says. "Want to come over and use the hot tub? My dad has a fridge full of beer in the garage." Frey says, "Won't he notice if some is missing?" "No," Leland says. "I drink it all the time. We just have to be careful with the cans. I normally ditch them in the dumpster behind Eddie's." This is a complete lie. Leland has never drunk her father's beer. She can't stand the taste, and she has no idea if Steve Gladstone will notice cans missing, though there are at least 2 cases in the fridge, so she kind of doubts it. "Cool," Frey says. "I'll be over in a little while." Leland races up to her room to pick an outfit and curl her hair. She puts the Police album Ghost in the Machine on her turntable and dances around. He's coming. Frey is coming. A little while ends up being 2 hours later, 9 o'clock, late enough that Leland has already spiraled through self-doubt and convinced herself that Frey won't show. She's wearing her red bikini under her Jordache jeans and a velour top. She has cracked open one of her father's beers. She pulled 6 out of the back. When you open the fridge, you don't even notice any missing. And she has poured a bag of Utz chips into a bowl and opened a container of onion dip, because her mother, Jerry, says people always appreciate a snack. The hot tub is bubbling like a witch's cauldron under the cover, and it's this that Leland suspects might get her in trouble. The oil bill. Her father is energy conscious. But why even have the hot tub if they can't use it? When the knock finally comes, Leland's heart leaps. She has finished one beer and feels as light and floaty as a spirit in the material world. "Hey," she says when she opens the door. Frey looks so fine. He has on a gray hooded sweatshirt under his Calvert Hall lacrosse jersey and jeans, and his high-top sneakers are, as ever, untied. He's holding a pair of swim trunks. "Haley," he says. They lock eyes, and Leland wonders why it has taken them so long to shed the blessings and acknowledge what has been true for a while now. They are meant to be together. When Leland looks back on that night, it seems almost painfully romantic in a nostalgic 1980s way. They each crack a beer. Frey changes into his trunks in the powder room. He helps Leland lift the top off the hot tub. They climb in, sitting on the same bench but not touching. Leland has the stereo in the rec room cranked to 98 rock, and the back sliding door is open so they can hear strains of Radio Gaga and When Doves Cry. They tap their cans of Natty Boh together and drink. They start kissing during We Belong by Pat Benatar. It happens naturally, like a magnet is drawing them together. It isn't Leland's first kiss or even her first tongue kiss. That was Jay Pitcock after the 8th grade dance back in May. But this is different. Frey is skilled with his tongue. He tastes like beer. He knows to put a hand on the back of her neck and pull her toward him. When they finally break apart, Leland is dizzy, dazzled. "I'll grab more beers," Frey says. He hoists himself out of the tub, and Leland watches him leave wet footprints on the rec room floor. When he disappears from view, she gets a crazy idea, then talks herself out of it, then decides to just go for it. Tonight is the night her life changes. She takes off her bikini top. Frey reappears, holding a six-pack by the plastic rings. Leland raises her bare breasts above the waterline. Her nipples are instantly hard. "Whoa," Frey says. He leaves the beer to the side and starts kissing Leland again. One of his hands finds her nipple and he rubs it back and forth, a feeling so exquisite that Leland feels like she's going to dissolve. Then he lowers his mouth to her nipple and gently sucks. She can see his erection poking up in his trunks. She wants to touch it but doesn't, because her mother has given her all kinds of instructions about what can happen if you lead a boy along too far. She will hold Frey at second base tonight. Second base with Fraser Dooley. It's so crazy, Leland can hardly believe it. A few weeks after Leland and Frey start dating, Coop and Frey are invited to a high school party thrown by a friend of Alana Bratton's whose parents are away. It will be mostly Bryn Mawr girls and Calvert Hall boys. Leland and Mallory go to Garrison Forest, so they won't know anyone, but Leland wheedles them an invite anyway. Once they get to the house, a mansion on Roland Park Drive, Coop and Frey disappear to do beer bongs, leaving Leland and Mallory to fend for themselves in the kitchen. The good news is that Alana spots them and takes them under her beautiful blonde wing. She gets the girls glasses of real champagne, Moët Chandon, that someone has lifted from the wine fridge. "I'll introduce you around," Alana says. "I should probably go find Frey," Leland says. Alana laughs. "Let him come find you." Which is exactly what happens an hour later. Leland and Mallory are in the library playing a drinking game called Three Man with two Calvert Hall seniors. One of them, a kid named Penn Porter, drapes his arm over Leland's shoulders just as Frey walks in. "Get your hands off her, Porter," Frey says. Leland jumps to her feet. "We weren't doing anything," she says. She's so drunk her words are slurred, and Mallory is slumped over on the green velvet sofa, eyes at half-mast. Frey storms out of the library. Leland wants to chase after him, but she can't leave Mallory drunk and alone with two senior boys. That's how date rape happens. She appeals to Penn Porter. "Can you help me get her to her feet? She's Cooper Blessing's sister." Penn rolls his eyes but obliges. He and Leland ease Mallory up. "Are you dating Fraser Dooley? That guy has issues. Seems to me you can do better." Leland leads Mallory through the house. She finds Frey in the kitchen, swilling from a bottle of Jim Beam. "We're ready to go," Leland says. "Great," Frey says, his eyes flashing with what Leland understands then are his issues: rage, jealousy, alcohol. "Ask your buddy Penn to get you home." "Frey," Leland says, "we weren't doing anything." He had his arm around you, Frey says, swigging from the bottle again. Just the smell is enough to make the room spin. I didn't see you fighting him off. You left me by myself for over an hour, Leland says. What did you think would happen? He shrugs. Just goes to show I can't trust you. Leland would like to say that this is an isolated incident, but the entire 3 years that Leland and Frey date are marked with similar explosions, like firecrackers on a string. She becomes only too used to what she comes to think of as Frey's white-hot sulk. But there is love, too. Real love. Desperate love. Frasier clinging to Leland, pressing his face into her neck and murmuring, "Please, baby, don't ever leave me." Now, as Cooper turns down the no-name road that leads to Mallory's cottage, and she sees the ocean glittering in the distance, Leland marvels at how much time has passed, and how much has happened. Leland went on to have a decade-long relationship with a woman. Frey became a billionaire. A billionaire? What must Penn Porter think about that? Leland's father, Steve Gladstone, went on to divorce Leland's mother and marry Frey's mother, Sloane Dooley. Technically, now Leland and Frey are step-siblings. These are the kinds of things that only happen in novels. In fact, Fifi wanted to write about it, but Leland put her foot down. "Where's Jake?" Leland asks when they pull up to the cottage. "Inside," Coop says. "He wanted some time to himself." No doubt, Leland thinks. If what happened between her and Frasier is one novel, then what happened between Jake McCloud and Mallory is another. Oh boy, is it. When they walk in, there's music playing. Cat Stevens singing Hard-Headed Woman, and Jake McCloud is standing at Mallory's bookshelves, running a finger over the spines. "I'm glad you're listening to this song now," Frasier says. "Get it out of your system, so we don't have to hear it again." Jake turns, smiles, and the men shake hands. Leland follows up, hugging Jake and kissing him on the cheek. "Don't listen to him," she says. "Leland, you're in Mal's room," Cooper says. "You can have Mal's room," Leland says to Jake. "I'm in the guest room," Jake says. "That's where I was the first summer." "Frey, you can take Link's room," Coop says. "I'll take the sofa." Leland carries her bag into Mallory's room and shuts the door behind her. The room is lovely, with its huge white canopy bed and peach and green attached bath. Leland kicks off her shoes, sits on the bed, and stares at the ceiling. "Can you see us, Mal?" she whispers. "I hope so. I very dearly hope so." Jake. He reminds himself that this weekend is for Cooper, not for him. He also reminds himself that, although it's Labor Day weekend, it won't be like any other Labor Day weekend that Jake has spent on this island. Mallory isn't here, and nobody knows about their rituals but her. Friday night, they eat at home, just like Jake and Mallory always did. Only instead of simple burgers, corn, and sliced tomatoes, Cooper goes to the Nantucket meat and fish market and returns with thick, marbled ribeyes, blocks of ruby red tuna, half a dozen twice-baked potatoes, colorful vegetable skewers, a container of Caesar salad, 2 pies, peach and blueberry, and a container of vanilla Haagen-Dazs. "And a charcuterie and cheese platter," Coop says, "in honor of my mother and her penchant for hors d'oeuvres. I also got a case of wine." Coop pours glasses of some obscure Riesling that he was tickled to find. Frey has water. And they all go out to the porch that faces the ocean. Cooper raises his glass. "To Mallory," he says, Jake has trouble swallowing. It's a clear evening, warm and summery. Jake watches the waves curl and crash, and he feels that Mallory is here somewhere, but where? In the golden sand? In the soft quality of the light? Jake is sure she would want them to be swimming. They're not that old, after all, and it's not that cold. Jake sets his glass down, heads inside to change into his suit, and then goes charging past everyone down the slope of the beach and into the water. Cooper joins Jake a few minutes later, and the two men bob in the waves as they gaze up at Frey and Leland, who are deep in conversation on the porch. "I just remembered that Mallory told me those two used to have a thing," Jake says. "A thing that refused to die," she called it. "That was back in high school," Coop says. "It's dead, believe me, long dead." "Thanks for inviting me here, man," Jake says. "I know you didn't like what your sister and I had going on." "You loved her," Coop says. "That's all that matters to me. I'm the last person who gets to comment on what kind of relationship is right and what kind is wrong." "The minute I realized I'd fallen in love with her, I was right here," Jake says. "It was maybe year 3 or 4. It was in the morning, and I was swimming when your sister got home from her run. She came out to the porch to stretch, and she didn't see me, so I could appreciate her without her knowing it. And I remember thinking, I love that girl. She had a light inside her," Coop says. "A funny, innocent light. A good person light." "I should have left Ursula and married her," Jake says. "There were dozens of times I wanted to do it, but I was afraid. I was afraid of life without Ursula. I was afraid your sister would turn me down. And I think we were both afraid that once we were officially together, our love would seem regular, and like regular love, it would die. Remember that one year Mal and I met you at PJ's at Christmas time, and the two of you were dancing by the jukebox? I should have figured out what was going on with you two back then." "You should have," Jake says, "but you were too busy chatting up Stacy." Coop splashes him. "I've got first shower." Right before dinner, Jake gets an idea. He searches through the cabinets until he finds a mason jar, and then he goes out the back door and snips the last remaining hydrangea blossom off the bush and puts it on the harvest table as a centerpiece. Now it feels like Mallory is there. They all sit at the narrow table, which is lit only by votive candles. Jake recalls the year Mallory decided to use tapers, and one fell while Jake and Mallory were in the bedroom fooling around, and the cottage nearly burned down. And one of the firemen who showed up was Mallory's ex-boyfriend, J.D. After he finishes his second glass of wine, he considers telling this story, but it feels too precious to share. Leland says, "Let's go around the table and say which of Coop's wives was our favorite. My favorite was Tish." Cooper laughs. He really is a good sport, Jake thinks. "Tish was my least favorite," Coop says. "She was in love with someone else when she married me. Her family friend, Fred from San Francisco. They've been happily married for over 20 years and have a business flipping houses in Nob Hill. Their daughter goes to Stanford." "My favorite was Valentina," Frey says. "She was a sweet woman." "Sweet," Coop says, "but using me to escape an arranged marriage." "Did she go back to Ecuador?" Jake asks. "Oh, yes," Cooper says. "I'm not sure if she ended up with Pablo. That was the guy her parents wanted her to marry. I haven't heard from her in nearly 25 years. He stabs a piece of steak with his fork. "It seems surreal that I could have stood at the altar at Roland Park Presbyterian and taken a lifelong vow to stay with someone, and then that person and I split a few months later, and I never see or hear from her again. Leland digs into her twice-baked potato. I hate to say this, but I can't even remember who wife number 4 was. Did I meet her? Tamala, Coop says. Poli-sci professor at Georgetown. She had 3 teenagers that took up a lot of her time and energy. One was gender transitioning. Her first husband was killed in a highway crash. The kids were devastated, and they resented me. We eloped in Antigua. That was romantic, but then it was back to reality, and reality was challenging. How long did that one last? Jake asks. He can't remember much about Tamala either. He does remember Coop eloping, because Ursula had been relieved to be spared another wedding, and Jake had felt robbed of a chance to see Mallory. 2.5 years, Cooper says. The irony is that I'm still in touch with the kids. They love me now. Amy was nice, Jake says. He met Amy at a Johns Hopkins alumni event in D.C. She had kind brown eyes and a way of tilting her head to let you know she was really listening to you. That was the problem, Coop says. Amy was nice, sweet, accommodating, eager to please. There was no mystery, no intrigue, no edge. And that's what you're attracted to? Leland asks. You fall in love with the edge? The crazy parts, the dangerous parts? I'm not sure, Coop says, draining his wine. I'm not sure what's wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, Coop, Leland says. I mean, this group isn't exactly filled with spokespeople for successful relationships. Jake frowns at his plate. It's true that he and Ursula are divorced, but that they stayed married for so long feels like a success. However, he would say his most successful relationship was the one he had with Mallory. He's probably deluding himself. I notice nobody chose Crystal as his or her favorite, Frey says. Coop groans. Crystal. He whistles. In some sense, Crystal is the reason we're all here. 30 years ago, when we did this the first time, Crystal called and demanded I come home. Oh yes, Jake remembers it well. He's always wanted to send Crystal a thank you card. It was because of Crystal that he and Mallory got together. Cooper says, I wonder how life would have been different if I'd just ignored Crystal when she called. What if I stayed and went to the chicken box like I was supposed to? Maybe she would have called off the wedding. And maybe, without making that first mistake, I could have avoided the others as well. Coop leans in toward the candlelight. His face, now weathered with age and experience, glows a pinkish orange. If I'd stayed on the island on this night 30 years ago, so much would have been different. Jake nods slowly. He can't bear to imagine things unfolding any differently than they had. It's probably safe to assume things worked out the way they were supposed to. Amen, Frey says. Well, I'm not sure about you guys, Coop says, standing up and tossing his napkin on his plate. But I'm not missing out on the chicken box tonight. The chicken box looks exactly the same. The concrete floor is sticky with beer, and there's a crush of people at the bar. The only difference between now and the first time Jake set foot in the place in 1993 is that now every single person is holding a cell phone. The band is on stage singing Just the Two of Us by Grover Washington Jr., a song so old it's new again, apparently. And up front, there's a group of people dancing and taking videos of themselves dancing. Leland and Frey opted to stay home, so it's just Jake and Coop on this nostalgic adventure. They're by far the oldest people here. They are gray-haired geezers, and Jake trains himself to keep his eyes off the scantily clad girls his daughter's age. I'm going up front to dance, Coop says. Have fun, Jake says. I'll be at the bar. He chooses the less populated side, over by the pool tables, where there's a bit of breathing room. It takes so long for the bartender to notice him that when she finally does, Jake orders 4 Coronas, 2 for him and 2 for Coop. Cooper, however, is nowhere to be seen, and Jake doesn't want to try moving 4 beers through this crowd, so he stays put and starts drinking. A female voice says, "I'll give you $20 for one of those." Jake turns. There's a woman in a white t-shirt and cut-off jean shorts with a long blonde braid standing next to him. She's in her 40s somewhere, maybe even her late 40s, though he'd be too afraid to hazard a guess. "Have one," he says. "Please, my treat." "You're my hero," she says. She takes one of the cold bottles and rolls it across her forehead. "It's my girlfriend's birthday and she dragged me here. It's fun to dance, but it's hard to not feel completely geriatric." "Tell me about it," he says. He offers his hand. "I'm Jake." She has a nice, firm shake. "Brooke Schuster," she says. "You look familiar to me for some reason. Have we met before?" Jake stares at the lime wedge choking the neck of his bottle. "No, I don't think so." "Are you sure?" she says, "because I swear—" "I'm Jake McCloud," he says, and when that doesn't clear up the confusion on her face, he adds, "My ex-wife, Ursula de Gournsey." Brooke snaps her fingers. "Yes, that's where I know you from." She takes a sip of her beer. "Well, if it makes a difference, I voted for her and I was sorry to see her lose." "Everything in life works out as it should," Jake says. "Spoken like a man who wants to change the subject," Brooke says, "and I can't blame you. What are you doing here at the box?" "Ah," Jake says, "reliving the past with a buddy of mine from college." He takes another quick look at Brooke. She's pretty, he decides, and the cut-off shorts are giving him strong Mallory vibes. He checks her left hand. She's wearing a lot of silver, but nothing that looks like an engagement ring or wedding band. So here it is, finally. An opportunity to have a conversation with a grown woman in real life. He can practically hear Bess urging him along. "Come on, Dad. You have to get back out there." But dating, or even chatting up someone, feels like so much effort. Getting to know someone from scratch, starting all over with personal histories, figuring out what makes someone else tick. He's not sure he's up for it. Brooke sets her beer firmly down on the bar. "I'll probably regret saying this in the morning, but I had something of a celebrity crush on you." "On me?" Jake knows he sounds surprised, though he's aware there was a small part of the female electorate across the country who turned a Jake McCloud crush into a thing. There had been an article in The Cut entitled, "The Very Real Sex Appeal of Mr. UDG." At nearly every event Jake did on behalf of his wife, someone would slip a note to him or brazenly approach his security detail, asking for a private meeting. Jake always told Ursula about these overtures, and when she could spare a few moments of her attention, she would pat his cheek and say, "I'm well aware how appealing you are, the adoring, devoted husband, handsome and well-spoken, and I'm grateful." This patronizing response had stoked Jake's resentment. Ursula only cared about how Jake's persona reflected on her, but Jake had continued to be upfront about every woman who approached him, in the name of propriety. Brooke says, "You're the executive director of the CFRF, and my nephew Charlie—" She stops and her eyes shine with tears. "We lost him to cystic fibrosis a few years ago." "I'm so sorry," Jake says. And I didn't mean to be flip when I said everything works out the way it's supposed to. In my business, I know that's not the case. How old was he? 26, Brooke says. He was my sister's only child. That's so difficult, Jake says. I lost my twin sister to CF when we were 13. I know, Brooke says. I read the profile of you in Time. I just want you to know how grateful I am for all the work you've done, the money you've raised for research. You became my sister's personal hero. When she blinks, a single tear rolls down her flushed cheek. I can't believe I'm talking to you here, at the chicken box. Jake wants to take the conversation in a lighter direction, but how? He has no experience talking to women like this, as evidenced by the fact that Brooke is now crying. Do you live here year-round? I do, Brooke says. I teach English at the high school. You... what? Jake says. He feels a surge of energy course through him. Did you know my friend Mallory Blessing? Brooke's face drops. I only knew of her, she says. Dr. Major hired me to replace Mallory. Before Jake can react, this is Mallory's replacement? Cooper appears, sweaty and grinning. Why'd you leave? He asks Brooke. Band's just getting started. I was thirsty, Brooke says. She looks between Cooper and Jake. Do you guys know each other? Best friends, Coop says. He lifts one of the unclaimed Coronas off the bar and takes a swallow. Coop looks at Jake. Brooke is here with Mallory's friend Apple. It's Apple's birthday. Whoa, Jake thinks. It's a small island. He listened to Mallory talk about Apple for years and years. Her best friend, the guidance counselor at the high school, married to Hugo, mother of twin boys who might be in high school or even college by now. But Jake never met Apple, and Apple doesn't know Jake exists. I'm sure Apple is wondering where I've gotten to, Brooke says. She offers Jake a tentative smile. Want to join us on the dance floor? Jake knows the fun, good sport answer is, sure, why not? But dancing up front at the chicken box is too far out of his comfort zone. You kids go have fun, he says, and he feels only the slightest pinch of regret when Cooper takes Brooke by the hand and leads her away. When the lights come on and the bell rings for last call, Jake wanders through the bar, weaving around couples making out, taking selfies, drunkenly debating where to go next, until he finds Coop standing with Brooke near the exit. The three of them step out into the warm, dark night. We closed the box, Coop says. A dubious distinction, Brooke says, especially if one of my students finds out. Brooke is a high school English teacher, Cooper says. She was hired to... Yes, Jake says. She told me. That's crazy, right? Coop says. So, should we go get pizza? Brooke laughs. I'm afraid I have to call it a night. She twirls her braid and looks up at Jake in a way that seems meaningful. It was nice to meet you guys. I hope to see you both on Sunday. What's Sunday? Jake asks. Apple is hosting a beach picnic at 40th Pole, Brooke says. She invited you both. We'll be there, Coop says. Let me walk you to your car. I'll be fine, she says. I'm just across the street. She looks at Jake again. It was nice meeting you guys. With that, she slips across the street, and both Coop and Jake watch her until she disappears. Is it Sunday yet? Coop says. In the morning, Jake tiptoes out of his room so as not to disturb Coop, who is sprawled across the big white sofa that Mallory had nicknamed Big Hugs. Jake pours himself a cup of coffee. It's the frayed edge platinum that Frey brought as a gift, which was an excellent surprise because it retails for $45 a pound, and steps out the back door to tie up his running shoes. Thanks to the wine, the beers, and the late night, Jake's head feels like it's stuffed with cotton batting. But the morning is clear, with just a hint of coolness in the air. Autumn is coming, and Jake doesn't want to waste another second sleeping. Back when he used to visit Mallory, he would only sleep a few hours per night. The rest of the time he would spend watching Mal, memorizing her face, drinking her in. And yet he was never tired. He always left the island with his emotional batteries recharged. Perfect love existed, he would think. It existed here on Nantucket. He sets his cup of coffee on the porch railing and listens to his joints pop as he touches his toes. Then he sets off running down the no-name road, which meanders along Myakomet Pond. He heads all the way out to Surfside Road, then loops around to the other side of the pond, and only then, when he's hot and sweaty and parched dry, does he realize he's come too far. He can't get back to Mallory's cottage this way without a significant beach walk. This, however, will be shorter than retracing his steps, so he sits on a rock to take off his shoes. He becomes mesmerized by the clear green water lapping at the muddy shore. Is he thirsty enough to drink a handful of pond water? No, but close. He's just about to head up over the dunes to the beach when he sees a woman walking a Bernese mountain dog, holding the dog's leash in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. She looks like a goddess from a Greek myth. "Hey!" the woman calls out. Jake wonders if he's trespassing. When she gets a few steps closer, Jake sees that it's Brooke. Her hair has been let out of its braid, and it's long and wavy under a navy blue Nantucket Whalers baseball cap. "Oh, hey," Jake says. This is like magic, he thinks. He would be lying if he said he hadn't thought about Brooke the night before and again during his run. He had been looking forward to seeing her on Sunday and had even toyed with inviting her to the CFRF Gala in Boston at the end of October as his guest. He's not sure what he's thinking. He lives in South Bend, Indiana, and has no plans to move to Nantucket. No, if he'd wanted to do that, he would have done it 30 years ago. He waves at Brooke and pushes himself to his feet. He's so overheated he's seeing stars. "This is Walter Cronkite," Brooke says, and Jake laughs. "You can call him Walt." Jake spends a minute rubbing Walt's head. He's always wanted a Bernese mountain dog, but Ursula pointed out that they didn't have time to take care of a pet. Jake thinks it's telling that Brooke has the exact kind of dog that Jake wants. Cool woman, cool dog. "Would you like some water?" Brooke asks. She hands him the unopened bottle that she's holding. It's seductively frosted with condensation. "Yes, please," Jake says, and he downs half the bottle in one gulp. "Thank you, you just saved my life." "I'm glad I bumped into you, actually," Brooke says. Her expression grows a little shy. "I had a question." "Oh yeah? What's that?" Jake says. The water has revived him like a plant. He's sturdy, upright, ready to get to know this woman better. After all, the connection is uncanny. She said she had a celebrity crush on him, she lost a nephew to CF just as he lost a sister, and she took Mallory's job at the high school. For all Jake knows, Mallory has, somehow, sent this woman to him. Because what are the chances that he would meet her in a crowded bar last night and then see her again this morning? "I was hoping you would give me Coop's cell phone number," Brooke says. "He was really great." Frey. He wakes up on Saturday to 2 missed calls and 3 text message alerts from Dead to Me, who is Anna, his ex-wife. Frey won't take the bait. He sets his phone down on the nightstand, rolls over, and gathers Leland up in his arms. She stirs as he kisses her shoulder. "Good morning," she whispers. "I'm happy to see this wasn't all just a dream." "Not a dream," Frey says, and he moves his mouth from her shoulder to the curve of her neck. "I'm real." They make love again, quietly, because the cottage is small, and despite the grand renovation, you can still hear people thinking in the next room. Frey hasn't felt this kind of unbridled desire in 4 decades. It's like he's back in high school. In the summer of 1985, Frey and Leland used to sneak out in the middle of the night to skinny dip in the country club pool, then have sex on the tennis courts. The difference between now and then is that Frey knows what he's doing, and so does Leland. She spent over 10 years in a relationship with a woman, an idea that Frey finds sexy. When Cooper told Frey that Leland would be coming on this reunion weekend, Frey never imagined they would end up in bed together. He'd been too wrapped up in the drama and pain surrounding his split from Anna. Getting involved with another woman, even his long-ago first love, was the furthest thing from his mind. But chemistry is chemistry, and Frey and Leland have always had it. Things had started to seem promising the night before, after Jake and Coop left for the chicken box. Frey didn't have many rules when it came to his sobriety, but no bars was one, and Leland said she didn't want to go either. Frey thought maybe she was just tired. They were older now. At home, Frey liked to be in bed by 9, something Anna found maddening. But as soon as they heard the Jeep rumble off down the no-name road, Leland grabbed a blanket from a basket by the sofa and said, "Come with me." She spread the blanket out on the beach. She lay down and patted the spot next to her. The second Frey opened his eyes to the starry sky above and listened to the crash and roll of the waves, he decided to share a realization he'd had earlier, but had seemed too private to talk about at dinner. "It's the 30th anniversary of my sobriety," he said. "Tonight?" "The Friday of Labor Day weekend 30 years ago, yes," he said. "Do you remember that night? You and I and Mal and Jake went to the box, and Coop stayed home to talk to Crystal. I went to the bar to get you a Chardonnay. You very specifically asked for one from the Russian River Valley. I'll never forget that. And they didn't have it, of course. They didn't have any white wine, only wine coolers. So I got you a beer instead, but then I couldn't find you. So I checked outside and you were with that preppy kid from the city. You left with him." "That was Kip Sudbury," Leland said. Kip Sudbury. The name rang a bell, one more recent than that night 30 years ago. Was he a Wall Street guy? A hedge fund guy? "He was involved in that bond scandal back in—" "Oh, right," Frey said. "He took me to 21 Federal to meet his friends, and the next day we went sailing on his father's yacht." "Well, I sat in the back of Mal's Blazer and drank by myself until the bar closed," Frey said. Memory was a slippery thing. Frey couldn't remember what he'd been served for lunch on his plane earlier that day, but he could vividly picture himself in his Nirvana t-shirt, smoldering like a red-hot coal in the back of Mal's car. He remembered being tempted to go with Leland and her New York friends because he'd thought he read some apprehension in her expression. But then Frey realized that what Leland feared was him coming along. She didn't want him to embarrass her and expose her for the regular Baltimore girl she was. And then, when we got back to the cottage, we realized Coop had left the island, and I snatched a bottle of Jim Beam and headed down the beach. Leland turned on her side toward him and laid her fingers across his biceps. He inhaled her scent. She had always smelled spicy, like sandalwood and ginger, rather than sweet or floral. That was one of the many things he loved about her. "I stripped down to go for a swim," Frey said. "At least, I think that was my intention, because when the paramedics found me, I was buck naked, passed out in the sand." Leland moved her hand down to Frey's thigh and leaned in so that her chin rested on his shoulder, and her words breathed straight into his ear. "I'm glad nothing happened to you." I wouldn't say nothing happened. The next morning when I woke up, I realized I had a problem. Frey often wondered why that had been his aha moment. It wasn't the drunkest he'd ever been. He used to black out all the time at the University of Vermont. And there had been one fateful night during a summer home from college when he bumped into Leland and Mallory at Beauregard's downtown. Leland had spent the whole evening talking to Penn Porter, who had been a classmate of Frey's at Calvert Hall, and Frey was jealous. He'd done at least 6 shots of Jägermeister at the bar, and the next thing he knew, he was waking up in Latrobe Park robbed blind with bruises all over his body and 2 teeth knocked loose. I decided I would take a break from drinking. That was all Frey had intended, a break. He certainly hadn't meant to go the rest of his life without tasting the first sip of an ice-cold beer or the velvety warmth of a good red wine on his tongue. But once the alcohol had cleared from his system, he liked how he felt. Powerful. In control. The control was its own high, and, if you listened to Anna, he was addicted to it. The break has lasted 30 years. Leland kissed his cheek. Her hand remained on his thigh, which could only be interpreted one way. Frey felt himself stiffen beneath his jeans. Anna had convinced him he was washed up sexually, but that had been an excuse she invented so she could justify sleeping with Tyler. "I'm sorry for my part in it," Leland whispered. Frey shook his head. "I blamed you initially because you were the easy target. My first love, the one I couldn't get out of my system." "When I landed here this afternoon, I was thinking about our first date in the hot tub." Frey was so hard he had to adjust himself subtly. The last thing he wanted was for Leland to move her hand. "You'd probably be uncomfortable to know how many times I've played back that scene in my head when I'm alone." "Frey? Seriously?" Leland Gladstone, the feminist, might have been offended to know that she was the subject of his sexual fantasies, but Leland Gladstone, the woman lying next to him, sounded flattered. "It was a horny teenager's wet dream," Frey said. "Coming back out to the hot tub to find you topless?" Leland propped herself on her elbow and gazed down at him. He could see that she was older. There were lines at her eyes and around her mouth, but she was still the same smart, sassy, complicated person he fell in love with another lifetime ago. Frey's upbringing, seen through the lens of 2023, might be described as compromised, meager, possibly even traumatic. His mother, Sloane, was wild and rebellious. She got pregnant with Frey when she was 21 and couldn't identify the father. There had simply been too many men, many of them sailors in port in Baltimore for a few days before shipping out. Frey's grandparents, Walt and Ida, took on the job of raising Frey. They were kind, but their household was abstemious. Walt and Ida didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't swear. They didn't allow Frey to eat potato chips or Cap'n Crunch, or drink Coke or chew bubblegum. His bedtime was 9 o'clock sharp. He had never once been allowed to stay up to watch Taxi, Barney Miller, or Magnum P.I. If Ida could hear his music playing through his bedroom door, it was too loud. Sloane would live with them periodically when she was between boyfriends and had nowhere else to go, and she acted more like an older sister than a mom. It was Sloane who had offered Frey his first cigarette at 14, his first drink at 15, his first toke of marijuana at 16. She did these things only when Walt and Ida were away or out of the house. "Your grandparents," Sloane would say. She always referred to Walt and Ida as your grandparents, as though they were of no relation to her. "Think I'm a bad influence on you." She was, of course. His own mother was a bad influence. In the face of that, Leland's love had been a life raft. As soon as Frey and Leland started dating, Frey stopped spending so much time at the Blessing house. Senior and Kitty had always been welcoming and inclusive, though Frey suspected they pitied him. He'd once overheard Kitty referred to Sloane as a perennial party girl, a term he knew was unflattering, but also not the worst thing she could have said. Frey found he felt more comfortable across the street with the Gladstones. Steve Gladstone took Frey under his wing, often taking Frey along on errands to the hardware or auto parts store, saying he was grateful to have another man around. Steve and Jerry came to every single one of Frey's lacrosse games junior and senior year, cheering for him as loudly as real parents might have. When Frey left for college in Burlington, he and Leland broke up for the first time. She was still only a junior in high school, and they both agreed the mature decision was to split up and see what happened. What happened was that they spent a small fortune on long-distance calls, and there were plenty of conversations that ended with one or the other of them slamming down the phone. But every time Frey returned to Baltimore, his first stop would be the Gladstones, even before his own house. Fraser Dooley had loved Leland Gladstone. She was a key part of his personal history. Last night on the beach, there had been nothing to stop them from making out on the blanket like the crazy kids they once were, before standing up and going back inside to lock themselves in Mallory's bedroom. Frey's phone rings again when he's underneath the covers, gently nibbling on Leland's hip bone, a sex move he feels he invented because Leland says, "God, nobody has done that to me in decades. Please don't stop." He hears the vibrating of his phone on the nightstand, and when Leland says, "Who's dead to me?" Frey tells her to ignore it. After making love, they decide to go out for breakfast. Leland scurries into the bathroom to freshen up, and Frey checks his phone. Anna didn't leave a message. It's 9:30 in the morning on Nantucket, 6:30 in Seattle. He clicks on her texts, in case there's an emergency with Cassie, their 10-year-old daughter. "You're unbelievable. Talk about a hypocrite. Check page 6. What? Frey thinks. Leland comes out of the bathroom. She's glowing, as luminous as he's ever seen her. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Frey says. He plucks his underwear from the floor. "Let's not bother showering," Leland says, tousling his hair. "We're just going to swim when we get back anyway, and I'm starving." "Me too," Frey says. "I just need to stop and get a copy of the New York Post on our way." Leland laughs. "I thought I was the only person I knew who read the Post," she says. "Fifi used to give me so much jazz about it." "Everyone reads the Post," Frey says, "but only the brave admit it." Coop is passed out on the sofa, and Jake is nowhere to be found. So Frey jots a note saying he and Leland are taking the Jeep to breakfast. He drives to the big mid-island grocery store and leaves Leland in the car as he runs in to get the newspaper. Page 6? Is he on page 6? Talk about a hypocrite! What does that mean? Leland had asked about Anna the night before, but Frey dodged the question. His divorce was the last thing he wanted to talk about. He imagined that getting divorced as a regular person, an accountant in Cheyenne or a florist in Shreveport, would be painful and difficult enough, but as a very wealthy, semi-famous person, it was a whole other circle of hell. Frey and Anna's story, although not unique, was a source of endless tabloid fascination. Anna had cheated on Frey with Tyler Toledo, the manager of her former band, Drank. They had been spotted out to dinner at Lausanne by one of Frey's vice presidents while Frey was down in South America on business and while Cassie was home with a sitter. When Frey asked Anna about it, she broke down in tears and said that yes, she and Tyler had been seeing each other for 9 months, and it was all Frey's fault because he had robbed Anna of any identity except for that of Fraser Dooley's wife and Cassie Dooley's mother. She used to be interesting, she said. She used to be cool. Now, she was just another Botoxed Seattle socialite with a private Pilates instructor and a 12,000-square-foot glass house on Puget Sound. Frey had asked Anna if she was in love with Tyler, and Anna had said she was, though it was clear from both her facial expression and her tone that she was lying. She didn't love Tyler Toledo. Sleeping with him was an act of rebellion, a cry for attention. Frey did a little investigative work and found out that Tyler's best days had been when he was managing Drank. Since then, he had couch-surfed his way around Queen Anne and Capitol Hill. He'd even been homeless for a while. Certainly, reuniting with Anna, Drank's former bassist, had been a huge boost to him, especially since she was married to the 8th richest man in Seattle. Frey thought maybe he could pay Tyler off to make him go away, but when this was intimated, Tyler doubled down and leaked the scandal of his affair with Anna to Google News, and in a nanosecond, it was everywhere. It was news of the scandal rather than the scandal itself that led to the divorce. Frey could have forgiven the infidelity. What he could not forgive was Anna on TMZ both disparaging him and shamelessly promoting old songs by Drank. It worked. Their song, Back It Up, had a surge on iTunes. The tabloids gobbled up the seedy aspects of the story, which was bad for everyone involved, but especially for Cassie. 10 was such a tricky age. Cassie was old enough to understand what was going on, but not old enough to understand why. And Anna had broken every single rule in the Evolved Parenting Handbook. She thought nothing of bad-mouthing Frey in front of Cassie any chance she could get. Frey agreed to a $280 million settlement only because he wanted the whole thing to be over. He grabs the last copy of the Post at the Stop and Shop and somehow resists looking at the paper in line. When he gets back to the car, Leland has the radio cranked to the rock station, playing the top 500 songs of all time, and she's singing along to Heaven by Bryan Adams. You're all that I want. You're all that I need. She turns down the music and grins at him. This song has always reminded me of the Calvert Hall Junior Prom. Remember my lavender dress? Frey shakes his head, but he can't stop his smile. I need coffee, he says. Fraser Dooley loves nothing more than a good breakfast place, and as soon as he sees Island Kitchen, he knows he's found one. It's mid-island, right across the street from the Stop and Shop, as it turns out, so it doesn't have a water view, but the place is loaded with character. The post and beam construction is charming. There are lush pink impatiens in the window boxes. It feels rustic and homey, like the island's kitchen. Frey and Leland are seated at a two-top inside where Frey immediately detects the scent of frayed edge classic black. This comes as no surprise because it was his New England sales manager who gave him the name of this place. A server with a dark ponytail and freckles, her name tag says Sarah, comes over holding the signature frayed edge silver pot and says, "Coffee?" "Please," Frey says, nudging the chunky ceramic mug forward. "I'll have tea," Leland says. "Herbal, if you have it." "Right away," Sarah says. She pours Frey's coffee and, despite the steam, Frey can't get it to his mouth fast enough. He looks at Leland. "You're on a date with me, and you're ordering tea? Herbal tea?" Leland laughs. "I did it just for that reaction." "Excuse me," Frey calls out. "My beautiful friend here will have coffee as well. This is frayed edge, right?" "That's all we serve," Sarah says. She takes a second look at Frey and he watches recognition cross her face. "Oh my God, you're..." Leland hoots. "Do you get recognized everywhere you go?" Sarah pours Leland's coffee and lowers her voice. "Someone called us yesterday to say you might be coming in. They wanted to make sure we had the signature pots and all the signage." "It looks great," Frey says. Sarah turns her attention to Leland. "Oh," she says, "you're the woman from the New York Post." "I don't work at the Post," Leland says. "I'm Leland Gladstone of Leland's Letter." Frey gets a sinking feeling. The Post is folded in half on the bench next to him. "We'll be ready to order in just a minute," he says. Frey finishes his first cup of coffee and decides to distract Leland with another topic they've been avoiding: their parents. 25 years earlier, Steve Gladstone and Frey's mother, Sloane, had an affair. Steve ended up leaving Jerry Gladstone and marrying Sloane. Frey speaks to his mother sporadically, but he hasn't seen her and Steve in a few years. He gathers that Leland keeps contact to a minimum as well. She aligned herself staunchly with Jerry. He reaches for Leland's hand. "How funny would it be if we called Steve and Sloane on the way home and told them we're back together?" "I'm trying to forget the unfortunate fact that we're actually step-siblings," Leland says. At that instant, Leland's phone pings and she checks the text. "It's my mother. I kid you not, just look at this. She says, 'Are you with Fraser Dooley?'" Leland holds up the screen of her phone. "Tell me that's not spooky." Sarah shows up with the silver pot and refills both their cups. Frey is starting to sweat. "We're ready to order," he says. "I'll have the panko eggs Benedict." "And I'll have the bananas Foster French toast," Leland says. Sarah leaves and Frey feels his phone buzz again. "Dead to me." He declines the call and sighs. "I got the Post for a reason. I think there might be something about me on page 6. "Eee!" Leland says. "Let's look together, come on." She slides around to his side of the table, picks up the Post, and slaps it down in front of him. "You do the honors." Frey stares at the paper. What is he going to find? He tries to remember if he heard any drones during the night. "Or I can?" Leland says. "No, I'll do it." He opens the paper to page 6. And there is a photograph of Frey and Leland kissing outside the Nantucket airport. The headline reads, "Fraser Dooley's Tony Island Getaway with Feminist Icon Leland Gladstone." To her credit, Leland doesn't shriek or scream. but when she pulls her reading glasses out of her purse, he notices her hands are shaking. Coffee mogul Fraser Dooley greets paramour Leland Gladstone outside Nantucket Memorial Airport. The couple were then whisked away by a private vehicle. Leland turns to Frey, and all he can think is how sexy she looks in her glasses, like a naughty librarian. "That's why our server said I was from the Post," she whispers. "And that's why my mother texted. They've already seen this." Everyone reads the Post, he thinks, but only the brave admit it. He can't gauge where Leland is going to land on this. He's pretty sure her brand depends on her sexual identity, which is, well, whatever it is, it's probably not compatible with a weekend rendezvous on the arm of a white male billionaire. "I'm sorry," he says. "I attract all kinds of attention because of the business. And the whole thing with Anna has made things exponentially worse." "Has Anna seen this?" Leland asks. "Was that her calling this morning?" Frey nods. "I'm the one who's sorry," Leland says. "I know who took this picture. There were 2 women on my plane who asked for a selfie, and then when we were walking out of the terminal, they were behind me, and I overheard them recognizing you." "So they took our picture and sold it to the Post," Frey says. "I'm sure they think they won the internet jackpot," Leland says. She picks up the paper. "Does feminist icon make me sound old?" "Icon is better than mogul," Frey says. "Mogul is such an ugly, hobbity word." "I can't believe this," Leland whispers. "I mean, it wouldn't be funny, except it's true. I am your weekend paramour." "Will you get canceled?" Frey asks. "Will you be hounded by trolls? Do your readers think you sleep with women?" "My sexuality is considered fluid," Leland says. "It's 2023. Everyone's sexuality is considered fluid, Frey." "Oh," Frey says, "his sexuality doesn't feel fluid. It feels very Leland-specific." "So this isn't necessarily bad for you, then?" "I don't know, and I don't care," Leland says. "I've been happier the past 24 hours than I've been... maybe ever." This statement nearly brings Frey to tears. He hasn't been this happy maybe ever either. He thinks back to his much younger self, glaring at the payphone in his freshman dorm after just having hung up on Leland, who was back in her bedroom on Deepening Road in Baltimore. What had they been arguing about? Who knows? Maybe Frey told her he was pledging a fraternity. Maybe she told him she and Mallory were going to a party with boys from Gilman. He then pictures himself in the back of Mallory's blazer, calling Leland every swear word he knew under his breath after she strolled off to 21 Federal with Kip Sudbury. He had no idea then that all he needed for things to finally be perfect between him and Leland was patience. A lot of patience. Bess. Everything about her Friday evening improves all at once. Not only has she traded up in the date department, she bumped into Link Dooley, a boy she has thought about ever since she met him on Nantucket 3 years earlier, but she is also leaving behind the Drake and Buffalo Wings scene at Roofers Union for Lapis, her favorite restaurant in the district. Lapis is quiet and elegant. It gives off strong bistro vibes, only with sitar music. The owner, Shamin, gives Bess a smile when she sees her enter with Link. Shamin leads them to one of the tables in the window. Bess thanks her profusely, even though, because of the conversation she's about to have, she would prefer a table tucked behind one of the latticed wooden screens. "Wow," Link says. "You get star treatment." "I come here a lot," Bess says. She doesn't mention that this was the one place in D.C. where Ursula would eat in public while she was campaigning. Shameen made every accommodation to ensure that Ursula, Jake, and Bess were comfortable. "I love bologna," Link says, "and Kabuli pilau." "The pilau here is off the chain," Bess says. "It's made with cinnamon rice." "We have to get the halwa for dessert," Link says. Bess beams. Link really does like Afghan food. All she can imagine is the lobbyist looking at the menu and ordering a chicken kebab and French fries. "Let's get the pakoras to start," she says. She wants to pinch herself. How did she get so lucky? Once they're settled with a glass of Albarino for Bess and a beer for Link, Bess realizes this happiness comes with a price. She has promised to tell Link what was going on between her father and his mother. Link tears a piece off his flat oval of bologna and dips it in yogurt sauce, then raises his eyes to Bess. He's better looking than any lobbyist, she decides. She loves his shaggy blonde hair and his bluish-green eyes that remind her of the ocean the day she first met him. "So, your dad told you what was going on?" Link says. "He told me on the way back to St. Louis after we saw you," Bess says. She busies herself with her own bologna. Her father made her solemnly swear never to tell a soul, and she had promised. She understood the gravity of the situation at the time. Her mother was running for president, and there could be no scandalous family secrets floating to the surface. If Bess told her best friend Pageant or Casey, the campaign manager, in a moment of weakness, it would be all over. Her father was entrusting her with a secret he'd kept longer than she'd been alive. She realized that he was telling her because she was the one who had made the trip to Nantucket with him, because she'd asked him what the whole thing meant, because he loved her, because he was sodden with emotions when he left Mallory's bedside holding the rented guitar, because Mallory was a day or two from death, and by telling Bess what had happened between them, he was keeping Mallory alive. Their circumstances were different now, of course. Ursula had lost the election, and she was no longer in public life. No one cared about Ursula de Gournsey and Jake McCloud anymore. Their divorce hadn't even been noted by the press. It wouldn't matter who Bess told about this secret now. But she still felt guilty because it was her father's story to tell, and not hers. What would he think about Bess sharing it with Lincoln Dooley? Well, he would either be appalled, or he would think that Link deserved the truth, just as Bess did. She'll go with the second choice, since she can't very well back out now. Link is looking at her expectantly. "They had an affair," Bess says. "One weekend a year. Labor Day weekend, actually." Link's brow creases. "Does that have anything to do with why everyone is up on Nantucket this weekend?" "They're reliving the summer of 1993. That's when your mom and my dad met. Your uncle and your dad were there too." "Ah," Link says. 30 years ago." "Yep." "So, did they see each other only on Labor Day weekend?" "Yes. Always on Nantucket. From 1993 until, well, 2020. "Where was I when this was happening?" Link asks. He looks at Bess as though she might have the answer. "You know what? I always spent Labor Day weekend out in Seattle with my dad. All through growing up, I did that. Except for one year I went to D.C. to see my uncle. And another year, I went with an old girlfriend to New York City." Bess feels herself bristling at the mention of an old girlfriend. "My dad said they met every single Labor Day weekend, no matter what. Always at your cottage. They never missed a year." "And nobody found out?" Link says. Your mom never found out? A server sets their order of pakoras on the table. They're golden brown, fragrant, and still too hot to touch, never mind eat. Bess thanks him and points to her wine glass. She's definitely going to need another. My mom found out, or suspected anyway. She went to Nantucket in 2019 to confront Mallory. Link's eyes widen. She was running for president. She didn't think she could have it coming to light. Why did she go to Nantucket? Why didn't she just talk to your dad? She was afraid my dad would leave her, Bess says. She believed the only person who could put an end to the affair was your mom. Link leans back in his chair and takes a sip of his beer. Bess nudges the plate of pakoras toward him. He takes one and blows on it. I'll ask the obvious question. Why didn't your dad just leave your mom earlier? Why didn't he leave her in year 5 or 10 or 15? My mother... Link sets the fritter down without tasting it and stares out the window. She never got married. She had boyfriends when she was young and she hooked up with my dad, obviously. And there was a guy she was serious about when I was little, but that didn't work out. She was alone. I could never understand it. My friends didn't get it. So many of them thought she was super hot. My grandma used to get on her case all the time about meeting someone. He sets his elbows on the table and drops his head in his hands. Now, all I can think is that she wasted her life, year after year, waiting for Labor Day weekend to roll around. How do you live like that? Only seeing the person you love 3 or 4 days a year. My dad said it was, well, excruciating was his exact word. Link gives a short, bitter laugh. Excruciating for him? No offense, Bess, but he was married. He went right home to your mother. Link pushes away the pakora on his share plate and Bess thinks, oh no, no, no. She only wanted to tell Link what she knew. She didn't mean to hurt him or make him angry. You can see how this little arrangement... Same time next year, Bess says. It was a movie they used to watch. Yeah, well, the same time next year was profoundly unfair to my mother. That's what I told my dad, Bess says. The arrangement was lopsided and sexist. Bess remembers how Jake had patiently endured her tirade about white male privilege. He assured me that the arrangement was Mallory's choice. I guess there were a couple of junctures when my dad said he wanted to be with her on a permanent basis, and she turned him down. She didn't want to leave Nantucket. She never would have left the island. She said she was happy. He told me she had a full life. Bess's second glass of wine is dropped off by none other than Shameen herself. Is everything okay here? Shameen asks, eyeing the untouched pakoras. We are busy preparing your entrees. Delicious, Bess says, too eagerly, and she takes a perfunctory bite of pakora. Very good, Shameen says, smiling, and thankfully, she leaves them. Bess turns back to Link. I'm not pretending to know what your mother's life was like. You would know that far better than me. But my dad claims she had her job, her cottage, friends, a community, and you. Link looks at her incredulously, and she can't help but agree with him. She's ridiculous. She's trying to justify what happened between their parents when it was, quite clearly, unfair to Mallory. But then, Link does an amazing thing. He reaches across the table for her hand. Bess tries to act natural, but she instantly flushes from the neck up. She likes Link so much. Okay, she realizes she doesn't really know him, but she's been drawn to him since she first set eyes on him. stepping out of the cottage on Nantucket. He'd looked so forlorn, a boy on the verge of losing his mother. He'd been trying to escape the adults inside and, like Bess, he was probably wondering what the hell Jake McCloud was doing there. But he was kind and funny with Bess, and she thought she'd seen a spark in his eyes, like maybe he thought Bess was pretty, and then he offered to show her the beach. She'd wanted him to ask for her number before she left, but her dad had been standing there, and it wasn't clear if she and Link would ever see each other again, so what would be the point? "Don't you think everyone deserves to find love?" Link asks. "Isn't that what we're all programmed to search for? Someone we can connect with? A lover, a friend? Someone to build a life with?" Bess nods but is afraid to speak. She isn't sure if Link is trying to tell her she might be that person for him. Could she be so lucky? Or if he's blaming Jake for keeping Mallory from finding such a person. They found love, she wants to say. Maybe it didn't look like other people's love. A split-level house with a 2-car garage, family road trips in the summer, date night on Saturday. But that doesn't mean it wasn't romantic or real. That doesn't mean they weren't devoted. Something about the way her father described his time with Mallory made it sound very real and very romantic. And if 28 consecutive summers, no matter what, wasn't devotion, then what was? But before Bess can articulate any of this, 2 things happen. The first is that a server arrives with their entrees, and the second is that Link's phone plays Toto's Africa. Bess loves that song too, and the screen lights up with the name Stacy. Link stands up as his plate of palau lands. "I have to take this." Bess blinks. "Okay?" "Outside," he says. "I'll be right back." Who is Stacy? She wonders. An old girlfriend? A current girlfriend? She tries not to worry. It might be his boss or a coworker or a friend. She feels relieved that they are finished with the Jake and Mallory story. Maybe when Link gets back, they can eat and talk about their own lives like 2 normal people on a date. Bess watches Link on the sidewalk on his phone, his head bent, his ear plugged. She considers the food. It would be rude for her to start without him, but she's hungry, so she helps herself to one of the pakoras, which have finally cooled enough to eat. She devours one and is reaching for another when a guy takes Link's seat. Bess says, her mouth full. She swallows. "Wrong table?" "You're Bess, right? Bess McCloud?" The guy looks like a Hollister model, or like the lead actor in a sexy HBO series about the Ivy League's secret societies. And then, of course, it dawns on Bess. It's the lobbyist. "Aiden?" she says. "You ditched me," he says. "I finally made it to Roofers Union and you were gone." Bess stares at Aiden Heideck's perfectly coiffed dark hair, his sleepy brown eyes, and his square shoulders and realizes that, in the excitement of leaving Roofers Union with Link, she forgot to cancel this date. And not only that, she continued to share her location with Aiden. "I'm so sorry," she says. He tilts his head and gives her a slow smile. "It's okay. I was the one who was late." "Yeah, but that wasn't your fault. You got stuck on the metro." "That I did." He looks at the food on the table. "I don't mean to be a poor sport, but I don't like Indian food." "It's Afghan." "Even worse," he says. "I was really looking forward to wings at the roof." Only then does he seem to notice Link's empty beer glass and the share plate with the now cold pakora. "Oh, snap. Are you here with somebody?" Bess is at an utter loss. She checks out the window. Link is still on the phone, standing just off the curb in the street between two parked cars. Aiden follows her eyes and taps the glass. That guy? He's an old friend. He showed up at Roofers Union and... Oh God, Aiden, I'm so sorry. I meant to let you know I was leaving. I'm not like this, I swear. Aiden gets to his feet. It's fine, he says. I would suggest that we reschedule when you're not quite so busy, but now that I've seen you in person, I don't think I want to bother. Bess recoils. Did he just say that? She knows he's angry, but that was dirty. He leans down by her ear and says, The only reason I asked for this date is because I know who your mother is. Link approaches the table. Hey? Aiden turns around and smirks at him. She's all yours, bruh. Bess is so angry she wants to dump her palau all over Aiden's gorgeous lobbyist head. Instead, she stares at the table and waits for Aiden to leave the restaurant. She can't make a scene, not here. She wants to ask Shamin to wrap everything to go so that Bess can eat it alone in her apartment. Link was on the phone with Stacy for so long that all Bess can imagine is he's about to offer an excuse to cut dinner short so he can meet her. How can she live in a city filled with men and still not be able to meet anyone suitable? When she raises her head, Link has retaken his seat. He's leaning forward, staring at her. Friend of yours? That was Aiden, Bess says. The lobbyist. Aiden was the last man on Earth she should have chosen off Bumble. Now that I've seen you in person, I don't think I want to bother. The only reason I asked for this date is because I know who your mother is. He seemed like a real peach, and I'm sorry you missed out on spending the evening with him, but I'll try to make it up to you. Link reaches for Bess's hand again. Link doesn't seem like he's in a particular hurry to rush out, but Bess is wary. Everything okay with your phone call? Link shakes his head. It was my uncle's girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend? Almost fiancé? The woman who turned down his marriage proposal, which was what made him want to organize the Nantucket weekend? Yeah, that was her. She's had time to process. She's decided she wants to marry him after all, so she showed up at the house, but he wasn't there, so she called him and it went straight to voicemail, and she's convinced he blocked her, which he probably did, because what else would you do to the woman who turned down your proposal? And she wanted to know if I knew where he was. Bess is overcome with relief. Stacy isn't Link's girlfriend. Stacy is his uncle's girlfriend. Did you tell her? Link shrugs. I said I wasn't sure, but I thought he'd made plans out of town with a friend. Ah, Bess says. Did she think you meant a female friend? Link squeezes Bess's hand, then lets go so he can dig into the palau. I don't want to worry about Coop's romantic life, he says. I'd like to focus on my own. After dinner, Link asks if he can walk Bess home, and she says yes, and they stroll the streets of Washington, holding hands. When they reach the Sedgwick, Link escorts her to the door, and Bess says, Thank you for saving me from the lobbyist. Link lays a gentle hand on the side of her face, and then he leans in and kisses her. It's the best kiss Bess has ever received. Sweet, warm, just enough to leave her aching for more. Oh, she whispers. Link kisses her again. He pulls her to him, and soon they are making out while moths beat around the light over their heads. Bess pulls away. Would you like to come up? Link takes a breath, and Bess wonders, does he not want to come up? Was something wrong with her kissing? Link says, I feel like I should let you know something. Okay, Bess says. Seeing you once a year isn't going to be enough for me, he says. So, if we're following in our parents' footsteps, or fulfilling their thwarted destiny or whatever, that part has to change. Bess pulls out her key. She can't hide her smile. Deal, she says. Cooper. On Saturday, Cooper wakes up at noon. Noon? When is the last time he's done that? College? High school? He's an up at the crack of dawn, seize the day kind of guy, a morning person. But when he finally unsticks his eyelids, he can't deny he lacks any motivation to get up off the wide, comfortable sofa. Except that he's the host here. Ever so gently, he lifts his head from the cushion and gazes around the room. Nobody is in the cottage, though he hears voices on the beach. Coop swings his feet to the floor and stands up. He overdid it, drank too much, stayed out too late. Deep inside him, like a coin dropped in a well, rests a small sense of accomplishment. He closed the chicken box. The person he would like to tell this to is Stacy. He pours himself a giant glass of ice water and heads out to the beach, where Jake, Leland, and Frey are enjoying the sun. Jake is in his trunks sitting in a chair with a book open on his chest. His hair is wet. Frey and Leland are lying side by side on a blanket. Leland is in a black tank suit and a straw hat, and Frey is beside her. Something is funny about that. Cooper squints. It's bright outside, and he goes inside for his sunglasses. When he comes back out, he sees that Frey and Leland's legs are intertwined in a way that looks more than friendly. "Hello, all," Coop says, collapsing in an empty chair. "How are you feeling, old man?" Frey asks. Coop can see that Frey is also stroking Leland's shoulder. "Okay." Jake says, "Want me to make you an omelet? You must be starving." Coop feels queasy. "I think I'll go for a swim first, then see if I can handle food." "So listen," Frey says, "I booked a sunset sail on the Endeavor for Leland and me tonight, and then I got the two of us a highly sought-after reservation at the boarding house. I've heard their lobster spaghetti absolutely slaps, so I hope that's cool with you." Sunset sail? Lobster spaghetti? What does that mean, it slaps? The "for Leland and me" part he understands. Frey and Leland want to go to dinner alone. Coop made a 9:30 reservation for the four of them at Nautilus, but who is he kidding? He's not up for sitting down to dinner at 9:30. He'll fall asleep in his bow buns. He'll cancel Nautilus. He and Jake can get a pizza and watch college football. He feels a bit bummed that they aren't doing something all together, but he can't ignore his relief. He has been set free of expectations. Coop spends the afternoon waiting for the fog in his head to clear. The swim helps a little, and the pillowy omelet that Jake serves him with 2 pieces of toasted something natural herb bread soaks up the beer and the shot of tequila he did the night before. The tequila had been handed to him by a member of a bachelor party who called him Pops. He sits on the beach for a while, but the sun makes his headache worse. Jake suggests hair of the dog. He's drinking a dark and stormy, but Coop can't think about alcohol. Frey and Leland disappear inside, and Coop says to Jake, "Did something happen between them?" "They have a thing," Jake deadpans, "a thing that refuses to die." "Since the mid-'80s, Coop says. He lowers his voice. "I thought Leland liked women?" Jake shrugs. Jake dozes off in his chair and Coop heads inside to grab a Coke, thinking some caffeine might help. He sees Frey and Leland pop out of Mallory's bedroom all dressed up. Dressed up for Frey is jeans and a white button-down shirt that looks like it could have been pulled off the rack at Sears, but probably is by an Italian designer and costs $1,100. Leland is wearing a fitted black dress. After only one afternoon in the sun, she's tan. "Have fun, kids," Coop says. He is looking at Fraser Dooley and Leland Gladstone in 2023, but he's also having a flashback to Frey and Leland standing up against the cinder block wall outside the Calvert Hall boys' locker room after one of Frey's lacrosse games. Rumor around the school was that Leland gave him special favors if he scored a goal. "Hey, you can sleep in Link's room tonight," Frey says. "I've been upgraded." Leland kisses Frey's cheek. "Damn straight." Coop laughs and shakes his head. He loves them both. If they're happy, he's happy. After they leave, Coop thinks maybe he will go into Link's room and lie down. But he stops in front of the bookshelves, which hold not only Mallory's impressive library, but also a bunch of framed photographs. Many of them are of Link growing up and of Mallory and Link together, though there are also some wonderful photos of Mallory and Cooper as children, which Mallory must have taken when they cleared out the house on Deepening Road after Senior and Kitty were killed. There's a shot of Cooper, Mallory, Senior, and Kitty taken during brunch in the green room at the Hotel DuPont in Wilmington, Delaware. The Blessings would always go the Saturday after Thanksgiving because that was the first day the hotel was decorated for Christmas. Kitty used to go to the green room with her own parents, so the brunch tradition was very important to her. Coop recalls suffering through it his junior and senior years in high school following the epic Friday after Thanksgiving parties he used to attend. That's definitely the case in this picture. Cooper's eyes are bloodshot, his hair is uncombed, and his tie crooked. But what makes him laugh out loud is Mallory in her Kelly green monogrammed sweater and kilt, and knee socks. She must be 14 and she's wearing knee socks. Tears burn his eyes as he laughs. She was such a nerd. Before she had braces, she used to have buck teeth, and Cooper would tease her relentlessly. He also teased her about her adoration of Rick Springfield, her addiction to General Hospital, and the stubborn cowlick in her hair that she would spend the moments before leaving for school fruitlessly trying to tame. Coop knows that Mallory resented him growing up. Things came easily to him. Good grades, sports, charming all the adults in his life so that he got pretty much whatever he wanted. Mallory was shyer, a bit socially awkward. She preferred to stay in her room, lounging on her fuzzy purple beanbag chair, reading. Oh, and she ate saltines with butter. Coop closes his eyes. He hasn't thought of her saltine and butter addiction in decades. He picks up another picture where Coop is maybe 10 and Mallory 8. It's Easter. Coop is in a navy blazer, Mallory in a pink dress and headband, buck teeth protruding from her smile. They're standing in front of the fireplace at their grandparents' house, holding baskets filled with candy. Coop can practically smell his grandfather's pipe smoke. The next picture he picks up moves him even further back in time. Coop is maybe 7, Mallory 5, and they're wearing the lederhosen that their grandparents brought back from a trip to Munich. This picture is serious blackmail material. They look ridiculous. Coop laughs until he cries, and then he's bawling like a baby, because Mallory was his kid sister, and he misses her. He sets the lederhosen picture next to a picture of his Aunt Greta and Uncle Bo, who were the original owners of this cottage. Cooper remembers when Mallory was sent to Nantucket for the summer as a kid. He thought she was being punished. Little did he know. There were no pictures of Mallory with Jake, obviously, since their relationship was like a state secret, and no pictures of Mallory with any other men. Coop wonders then, as he often has, if there was something wrong with him and his sister. Mallory had a child but never married. Coop has been married 5 times, but none of the unions lasted, and he never had children. Was it random luck that things ended up that way? Or had they been defective somehow? Kitty and Senior, although they each had their faults, set a wonderful example. They were devoted and attentive and respectful of each other. Cooper Sr. could be impenetrable emotionally, but he had a soft spot for his wife. There had always been romance in the house. Long-stemmed roses just because. An evening spent on the couch in front of the fire, Kitty lying with her head in Senior's lap. Maybe they set an example that was too hard to live up to. Cooper thinks of Dr. Robb's point that he has suffered a lot of loss. It was all weighing on his shoulders now. He missed his family. He would give everything he owned to be back in the green room at the Hotel DuPont. He's overtired and growing very emotional. He needs a nap. Coop slinks into Link's room and crashes face down on the bed. When Cooper wakes up, the sun is setting in a blaze of pink on the horizon. Link's room, which has a window onto the beach, is suffused with rose gold light. Coop finds Jake in the living room drinking a beer in front of the Clemson-Ole Miss game. "Hey," Coop says, "should we order a pizza?" "There's something I forgot to tell you earlier," Jake says. "Do you remember that woman Brooke from last night?" "Yeah?" Coop says. "The teacher who was friends with Apple?" He's having a hard time coming up with Brooke's face, though he recalls thinking she was pretty. "I bumped into her this morning on my run," Jake says. "She was walking her dog." "Wow, small island," Coop says. Then he wonders if maybe Jake found Brooke attractive too. That would be great. Jake needs to get back in the game after losing Mallory and splitting from Ursula. And it would be so fitting, him dating the woman who replaced Mallory? Or would it be weird? "She gave me her number," Jake says, "and she told me to tell you to call her." "Me?" Coop says, laughing. This is unexpected. Or is it? Now that he thinks of it, he was dancing with her pretty exclusively. "Do you remember that they invited us to that beach picnic tomorrow?" "That's right," Coop says. He forgot about the beach picnic, but they were definitely invited. "Send me her number now. I'll text her and find out what time." Coop marvels at how well Sunday's schedule works out. At 8 o'clock, Coop, Jake, and Frey play 9 holes of golf at Mayakomet, while Leland bikes to a hot yoga class. They all meet back at the cottage for bagels and fruit salad and coffee, of course, and after a swim and a nap in the sun, they get ready for their respective afternoons. Frey and Leland are biking out to Sconset for a late lunch in the garden at the Chanticleer. Cooper and Jake put on polo shirts and swim trunks and drive out to a beach called 40th Pole, stopping at Cisco Brewery on the way for beer so they don't show up empty-handed. It's been an A-plus day so far. Coop shot a 45 in golf, he was sharp and clear-headed, and he loved hanging out with his 2 best friends for 3 hours. He feels even more excited about this picnic and the chance to reconnect with Brooke. They had a flirty text conversation the evening before. Brooke was making a blueberry pie to bring to the picnic, and she would be wearing a blue bikini. They drive the Jeep up over the soft sand road that cuts between the dunes until they come down onto a flat curve of beach. "Jake!" a woman calls out. "Coop!" The woman is blonde and wearing a blue bikini, so Coop figures it must be Brooke. She's with a group of people camped off to the right. She shows them where to park, and when Cooper climbs out of the Jeep, she throws her arms around his neck and gives him a big hug. Okay, he thinks. When they separate, he studies her face. She's pretty, smiling, and he does vaguely remember her from the other night. Vaguely. Apple is at the picnic with her husband Hugo and their twin boys, Caleb and Lucas, who are going to be seniors at the high school, and a bunch of other people whose names Coop tries to retain but loses after 10 seconds. He knows he doesn't have to worry about Jake. The guy raises money for a living and can talk to anyone about anything. Coop throws their case of beer into the tub of ice and cracks one open for him and one for Jake. This is the life, he thinks. Upside Down, by Jack Johnson, is playing on the portable speaker. The grills are smoking, and there's a table laden with food, including a blueberry pie with a lattice crust. Apple holds out a platter of oysters sitting in rapidly melting crushed ice. "Hugo just shucked these," she says. "Please, have one." "Then you two come play some bocce," Hugo says. "Jake, you're on my team." "No wonder my sister loved it here so much," Coop says to Apple. "You know something funny I remember about Mallory?" Apple says. "She never once came to our Labor Day picnic. She always claimed she was busy. Every year." "Oh, she was busy, all right," Coop says. "Bocce," Jake says. Coop hopes that he will be as impressive at bocce as he was at golf that morning. But he's the weak link, probably because he's distracted by Brooke, who is waving her drink around, chanting his name, "Cooper! Cooper!" He wonders how much she's had to drink and then reminds himself not to judge. She's a teacher. This is her last full day of freedom. She's allowed to be enthusiastic. The 10th grade history teacher, whose name Cooper thinks is Nancy, comes around with a tray of pink cocktails in plastic cups. "Nantucket mysteries," she says, "a Labor Day tradition." Coop tastes one. It's strong and goes down way too easily. The Spanish teacher, Jill, comes by with buffalo chicken dip and Fritos, and Cooper is a sucker for Fritos. Then the ribs and jumbo shrimp come off the grill. This is the best day he's had in a long time, even though he loses badly at bocce. "Want to go for a walk, handsome?" Brooke asks. She has pulled on a diaphanous white cover-up, and she hands him another Nantucket mystery. "Sure," he says. He checks on Jake, who is deep in conversation with the biology teacher over by the deviled eggs. He catches Jake's eye, waves, and points to Brooke. They head down the beach, walking past kids building sandcastles and collecting shells, and a teenager on a skimboard who looks at Brooke and says, "What's up, Miss Schuster?" Without missing a beat, she says, "See you Tuesday, Liam." "I love it," Cooper says. "You see your students at the beach." "I see my students everywhere," Brooke says. It's a small island. She then tells Coop her basic story. She's 48 years old and has 2 kids, a son who's a sophomore at UMass and a daughter who will be a senior at the high school, in the same class as Caleb and Lucas. She lives on the island year-round in a rental that she fears the owners will someday sell out from under her. But she doesn't make enough on her teacher's salary to buy her own home. "I always wondered how Mallory did it," she says. She was a single mom too, right? She was, Coop says. She inherited the cottage from our aunt when we were in our 20s. It's on the beach, but it's simple and pretty small. When my parents died, she had the money to finally renovate. Well, sadly, I don't have a rich aunt to leave me a beachfront cottage, Brooke says. She goes on to tell Coop that all of her family is in New Hampshire, which was where she lived before she got divorced from the children's father and decided she needed a change. She sighs. So, what do you like to read? Coop scrambles for one of the titles on Mallory's bookshelves, but he draws a blank. He was always the kid in English who skimmed the cliff notes 5 minutes before class. I don't read for pleasure because I do so much policy analysis at work. This answer is lame, and to distract Brooke, he reaches for her hand. It works, maybe too well. Brooke pulls him into the water. He manages to shuck off his shirt, but she goes in with her cover-up still on, which strikes him as a bit odd. Brooke paddles out, then turns to splash him right in the face, and when he sputters, she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, baby." And while Coop is thinking, baby? He hardly knows this woman. He wasn't even sure it was her when they pulled onto the beach, and he never would have recognized her on the street. She swims into his arms and starts kissing him. Whoa, he thinks, that was fast. We should probably get back, he says. She splashes him again, right in the face. You're no fun. As they're walking back, she says, So, how do I convince you to move into your sister's cottage and stay on Nantucket year-round? Coop laughs, even though he is now officially uncomfortable. Hopefully, in a few years when I retire, I'll be able to spend more time here. A few years, Brooke says. I'll be off the market by then. At a loss for how to respond, Coop quickens his pace. He's relieved when they get back to the party and Jake says, Leland called. We have to go. Did something happen? Coop asks. She didn't say. She just told me we were needed at home. Coop and Jake say their goodbyes, and Coop gives Brooke a hug and a quick kiss goodbye. I have your number, he says, and you have mine if you ever get to Washington. Brooke waves like crazy until the Jeep is up over the dunes. You like her? Jake says. Perfectly nice woman, Coop says, and attractive. But we had exactly nothing in common, and I'm not unhappy to be leaving. That's good to hear, Jake says. You two were gone so long, I was afraid you'd proposed. As they head down the no-name road, Coop wonders if he should be concerned. Frey and Leland both seemed giddy about their reunion, but all Coop can think now is that they had an argument. This would be par for the course with them, and Frey lost his temper and is threatening to leave. It would be sort of like what happened 30 years ago. But when they pull up to the cottage, Coop hears laughter and conversation coming from inside. He hears a woman who is not Leland. It sounds like... Coop throws open the screen door and steps inside. Frey and Leland are sitting at the narrow harvest table with Stacy. Stacy? She stands up and smiles at him. She's wearing a flowing white strapless dress and a pair of barely there sandals. She's every bit as captivating to Cooper as she was the first time he saw her in the basement of the Phi Gamma Delta house. Stace, he says, what are you doing here? I've had a change of heart, she says. So, if your offer still stands? Coop sweeps her off the ground. He grins at his friends. I'm getting married, he says. For the last time, Stacy says. Jake. On Monday, Frey generously offers to fly Jake back to South Bend on his private jet. "It's on my way home," he says. "It's no problem to make a stop. I'll have my pilot added to the flight plan." Frey and Jake part ways with the others outside the terminal. Leland is heading to New York, Cooper and Stacy back to D.C. Jake gives Coop and Stacy each a hug, as Frey and Leland share a very long kiss goodbye. "Wow," Stacy says, elbowing Coop. "Why don't you ever kiss me that way?" "I do," Coop says, and he pulls Stacy closer. "Time for me to get out of here," Jake says. He feels a lump rising in his throat as he recalls all the Labor Days that he kissed Mallory goodbye. No offense, but they put Frey and Leland to shame. Jake has never flown private before. It isn't something he's ever aspired to, and even when Ursula was an arm's length from the presidency, he never pictured himself aboard Air Force One. Good thing. Frey's plane is a Gulfstream 550, which Jake understands is a big deal. The plane has a pilot, a co-pilot, and a bubbly flight attendant named Heather. After Frey and Jake take seats in the living area, they're facing each other in buff leather chairs with a high-gloss table between them. Heather asks what they would like to drink. Jake is about to ask Heather for a Bloody Mary. Why not celebrate this crazy experience? When she says, "We have Classic Black, the Platinum, and..." She pauses dramatically. "This jet is one of the few places in the world where you can get a bottomless cup of Frayed Edge Select Reserve." Coffee. She's talking about coffee, of course. "We'll have 2 cups of the reserve. Thanks, Heather," Frey says. He looks at Jake. "Do you take anything in it?" "Cream, 2 sugars." As soon as the words are out, he wonders if Frey will disapprove. Maybe drinking the reserve with cream and sugar is like dropping an ice cube into a glass of Chateau Lafite. Takeoff is smooth. Frey gazes out the window as Nantucket slips from view. "Now that was a good weekend," Frey says. "I had no idea that was how things would turn out." Heather appears with 2 mugs, the signature silver pot, and a pitcher of cream and tiny bowl of organic sugar cubes for Jake. She winks at Frey. "I saw you on page 6, Mr. Dooley." "That was me with Leland," he says. "I can't wait to introduce you to her." "I've subscribed to Leland's letter for over 10 years, Heather says. "I didn't know the 2 of you were friends." "It's a long story," Frey says. "Literally." Jake sips his coffee. It's by far the best coffee he's ever tasted. Frey says, "Heather, would you pack up a couple pounds of the reserve for Jake to take home?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Dooley." Once Heather leaves them, Jake says, "So, will you and Leland continue to see each other? Aren't you worried about the distance?" "I'm going to New York next weekend," Frey says. "I have a brownstone on East 3rd Street that I had renovated, and I've never spent the night there. That's about to change." A brownstone in the East Village that he's never even slept in? It's only sinking in now just how wealthy Frey is. This is his jet. Those pilots are his pilots. Heather is his flight attendant. Whenever Jake has thought about Fraser Dooley in the past 30 years, his mind always conjured the angry young man who disappeared down the beach with a bottle of Jim Beam. Now, he's a billionaire who sells the world's finest coffee in the coolest cafes in the country. Jake has heard that the flagship Frayed Edge Cafe in Burlington, Vermont, has live music 24 hours a day. Billie Eilish has played there, Luke Combs, Ingrid Michaelson. "I could use your help with something," Jake says. "Anything," Frey says. I'm going to need a date for Coop's wedding. Sorry, man. I already have a date, Frey says, and they both laugh. Jake pulls out his phone. Have you ever used a dating app? He figures this is a stupid question. Frey is a billionaire, so, before Leland, there must have been a line of eligible women after him. No, man, but I'm friends with the woman who created Firepink, and that's the app you want. It's for users over 40, and it's marketed toward professionals. Firepink? Jake says. What about Bumble or Match.com? Is Match still a thing? He laughs. Honestly, I'm used to meeting women the old-fashioned way. I met Ursula in 6th grade. I hear you, Frey says. I met Leland when we were kids, and I met Anna at the cafe. Her band played there one night, and I fell in love. He's quiet, and Jake wonders why it's no longer popular to meet someone in real life. But trust me, you want Firepink. Here, I'll download it for you. Frey takes Jake's phone and taps and swipes. Then he hands the phone back to Jake and says, fill out the answers to these questions and click the Fire Up button. This app goes through tens of thousands of profiles in lightning speed and picks the top 3 women. I've heard you should always choose number 1. They have the highest success rate in the business with the first match. Their algorithm is magic. Jake chuckles. All I need is a wedding date. Still, he fills out the answers for his profile and then, once he's double-checked his responses, he presses the Fire Up button. The phone flips through faces like a Vegas dealer through a deck of cards. Jake thinks he sees a bunch of attractive women, but it's moving too fast and he can't make it stop. Until finally, a face appears on the screen. Jake blinks. It's a striking, dark-haired woman in what he recognizes as an Alexander McQueen suit. Ursula de Gournsey. Age, 56. Nickname, Sully. Height, 5 foot 6 inches. Hair, dark brown. Eyes, brown. Occupation, attorney, M&A. Address, New York City. Political party, independent. Birthplace, South Bend, Indiana. Favorite pastime, work. Jake laughs. We're supposed to go with the first choice, huh? Yeah, Frey says. Did you already match with someone? Let me see. Not yet, Jake says. I'm going to ask her out and I don't want you to jinx it. Yeah, bro, go for it, Frey says. You're a boss. Jake doesn't reach out to his ex-wife via Firepink. He texts her instead. Heading back to the Bend, he says. Guess what? Coop is getting married again. His 6th wedding. Next June in D.C. Jake sees the 3 floating dots, indicating that his number 1 match, maybe Firepink does know best after all, is writing back. Need a date? She asks.